is Signal and Noise, bringing clarity to data, tech, and AI.
Hey, this episode of Signal and Noise is sponsored by Aquifer. If you've spent any time in ad tech, martech, or data infrastructure, there's a decent chance you've benefited from Aquifer's technology without even knowing it.
Honestly, Brett, that's part of what makes them such an interesting company. Aquifer is one of those organizations that's quietly powering some of the biggest brands, biggest agencies, and biggest media organizations in the industry. And they're not trying to replace your stack. They're helping you get more value out of the infrastructure you've already invested in.
Yeah, and it's critical. Everybody's talking about AI and more increasingly talking about the growing cost and complexity of collecting, processing, and activating all of the data, which might live in a lot of different places within big organizations. And that's fundamentally what AI depends on to make its better decisions.
That's exactly right. So Aquifer helps organizations simplify that entire process so they can move faster, lower their operational complexity, and accelerate their AI-driven innovation without ripping everything apart, starting over, or dealing with unwieldy cloud costs.
Yeah, and they're led by some of the coolest industry veterans. Bill, their CEOs, helped build and scale some of the most important companies in ad tech. Their new CRO, Xander's a friend of the pod, and one of the most respected voices in the industry.
That's right, Brett. We're big fans over here. And if you're trying to get more value from your data, cloud and AI investments, Aquifer is definitely a company worth knowing, and I recommend checking them out.
Yeah, and visit aquifer.com, which is AQFER.com to learn more. This episode of Signal and Noise is brought to you by Telium.
This is a sponsor I'm genuinely super excited about, Brett. I've worked with Telium for years across multiple clients, frankly, multiple places where I've worked, and they've consistently been an outstanding partner with a strong team, great culture, and of course, really great technical expertise.
Yeah, and one of the things we talk a lot about on this show is that AI is only as good as the data behind it.
Exactly. Data quality, identity, consent, and real-time customer signals have become foundational. Most organizations are discovering their data isn't nearly as connected as they thought it was. And let's face it, AI exposes that really quickly.
And that's where Telium comes in.
That's right. Telium helps companies collect, unify, and activate customer data in real time, making it more useful for use cases like personalization, analytics, and of course, AI. And as one of the few scaled independent players in the customer data infrastructure space, they are a company worth paying attention to. Hi, Rio Longacre back here, Signal Noise, Cannes Lion 2026. We're getting towards the end of Cannes Lion. It's 4:30 on day number 4. We're back for round number 2 with Michael Beebe and David Bell. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk about transparency. It's a great topic because there's been, I think, a renewed debate about it now about should do brands want more transparency? Should they want more transparency? Are agencies willing to give them the transparency? So I'm excited to dig in here. Maybe we start out by do brands want transparency? I guess that's my general question to the two of you. Do they care about it?
I think David's best equipped to maybe answer that question, but my perspective on it is like we David and I have been talking about transparency all week together in the various conversations that we've been having. And there's been a big trend that, and I think is probably the genesis of this question and this discussion at the holdcos in particular towards non-disclosed margin principal media trading, right? And that's been a big driver of the results for a lot of the big agencies for many years, and it seems like
that's how we're making money in a lot of ways, right? Is through that.
And it seems like it's gaining momentum. It's not losing momentum, and the brands are of course aware and complicit. They're signing up for that. But in my view,
I think they're even encouraging it. I'd argue that.
That's my impression as well. But even beyond the agency business model, there's the non-transparency or the opacity that comes with the walled garden, right? The name walled garden tells you that they're not going to give you a lot of insight into what's happening behind those walls, and yet those are the media properties that are generating the vast majority of not only current dollars that are being spent in digital media, but the growth dollars, the incremental dollars, or a lot of the incremental dollars are going to these non-transparent walled gardens. And so I think transparency is unequivocally a good thing. I'm a little surprised that brands are not clamoring for more transparency. But it seems to me that the direction of travel in transparency is towards less, not more. But a lot of the conversations that we've been having, have been about this topic, and the idea is that the pendulum is going to shift. And I think David has seen this pendulum swing back and forth with transparency over a few cycles. So I think he's better equipped to answer the question of where we are. Maybe if we're reaching a peak in the swing of the pendulum.
I find it's interesting before you jump in, David, as well. Like I would think like back when, rewind 7 or 8 years, it was a duopoly, right? It was all 90% of new media spend, incremental media spend was going to Google and Meta. More than 50% was already going to them. So they had no incentive to be transparent, right? Because it's a walled garden, to your point. You put money in, you get some outcome out, right? And they give you like attribution, like forever attribution. And whether you can trust platform metrics is another story, right? So if it's a duopoly, there's no incentive to be transparent, right? On the platform side. But I think that we have such a fracturing of media. There's so many places you can spend money now. I would think that there'd be an incentive. I would think, given this environment, there would be more interest in transparency. But I agree with you. Based on what I'm seeing RFPs come in that say, no margin, you figure it out. We'll give you the money, you give us the outcomes to figure it out. That's the opposite of transparency. And that's what brands are asking for. So wondering would love your thoughts on this.
So thank you, Rio. So some history on transparency. There have been a lot of non-transparent waves, and I call them the greed waves. So on one side you have greed, on the other side you have trust, and the pendulum swings. In Europe, particularly France, there was a wonderful situation where the agencies basically did not pay a lot for service, maybe 20% of the value, because dirty little secret was that the media were rebating the agencies and it was keeping the costs down. That all came crashing down with a law called Loi Sapin, and it changed everything.
What year is this approximately?
I'm going to say it's probably the 80s.
Okay.
Bonification, which was rebates all over the world, kept lots of agencies running.
It still goes on
for
today.
A very long time. In the public companies, Sarbanes-Oxley kind of really dug into that, and it became a bit of a mess with all of that kind of thing. And so the transparent wave sort of came back. There were great agencies, I say great advisedly. Western International Media was a big media independent that was 100% non-transparent. Interpublic bought it. And I had forensic accountants trying to figure out how they'd screwed Interpublic in the sale. Western International became Initiative Media, which was fully transparent. I remember a time when I was running an agency in the 70s. I got visited by a company called Pepper & Tanner. Pepper & Tanner was a major non-transparent company, and they were doing things that were really interesting. They brought Denny McClain, the great pitcher, to my office. And I was trying to get the National Car Rental account. And they brought the National Car Rental client along with Denny McClain to my office. And their offer was very simple. I didn't need to have a media department. And I could have a National Car Rental car every 6 months. And I could have a Pepper & Tanner American Express card if I would turn my media over to Pepper & Tanner.
Quid pro quo. I mean, it's funny. Like even recently, I remember, like I used to work for a firm that did not have a media arm. And we were just doing like consulting, advisory, systems integration. And one of my clients would ask sometimes, "Are you doing a great job on this? You're building us like in-house team to just do measurement or analytics or I don't know, campaign trafficking." Sometimes they would ask, "Can you also like buy media for us?" And I would always say, I can't do it. I'm not allowed to in this role. We don't have a media arm. And I would call like an agency buddy. "Hey, listen, like this telco wants to buy a couple $1 million." And they would always say, "Well, how much? Like, where should I send the check?" I was like, "No, I don't want to take the check because it's not worth me ruining my reputation, destroying my career. But it was just shows how crazy the media business is for people who've never worked in media. Like that is like seen as like normal, right?
Yeah. So, but the underlying motivation for agencies to be non-transparent started with predatory procurement practices.
Okay, no disagreement, by the way. Yeah. I mean, I've seen it for like, you have consulting firms to thank for that. We created procurement departments. And we're all not paying the price because all they care about is low CPMs. Sorry, I cut you off.
Mm-hmm. No. So when the Association of National Advertisers hired K2 Consulting to do their study, and when the study came out, it was a rocket fuel for procurement departments. And so the pendulum swung back again because the trading desks that the agencies owned were not transparent, and the pendulum swung all the way back. So it's the war constantly between greed and trust.
No disagreement at all. But what I think is interesting, so I used to offer media audits to clients, not working for an agency, and like we'd every once in a while we'd win one, or we'd package it into like an in-housing deal or a media transformation, and like we would always find fraud. We'd always find waste. We would always find like insane things. They like made like 400% markups on certain buys with no explanation except like, oh, it's custom targeting, which is BS. This is what you marked it at 4x what you paid in the platform. There's no reason for this. Like you're stealing from your client. And I'm not saying that's normal, but it was not rare, right, to see things like this. And then we'd always find a minimum 20% just stuff that we felt they shouldn't be paying for, whether it's bad targeting or like invalid or inhuman traffic. So I remember like, oh, this is great. We can do this. And this is back before AI. This is when it was people going through like log files, right? And I was like, oh, this is great. We should bring this to every marketing client, and we should tell them we'll do it value-based. We'll do it for freaking free. And we'll just give us 20% of what you find, right? Or can recoup from your agency, which will then turn the screws to. And like, you know what? No one wanted to buy it. No one, I must have offered it to like 100 firms. I got one or two people said yes. Like, no, if you're the CMO that hired that agency, that's been paying that agency, that's been given a media budget for 10 years, do you want to be the one to tell the CFO and the CEO, look, we just recouped 20% of ad spend that was paid to like bots or like a made for advertising, like Click Farm in Romania or something? No, you don't want to be the CMO that was asleep at the wheel, even though it probably shouldn't be your fault because ad flow is really complex and difficult. But I thought it was so fascinating that there was like fear of finding out. No one wants to be the guy or the gal that and the only time we could do it is if there was a new CMO.
That's it.
And they wanted a scalp, right?
That's it. So that's what I was going to say. Your target needed to be the incoming CMO.
That's right.
So programmatic, the programmatic ad industry and digital overall is, I think, is notoriously complex, opaque. People talk about the ad tech tax. It's very hard.
And the ad tech supply chain. Yeah,
the ad tech supply chain is a really, really difficult supply chain. And, distillery, we like to think of ourselves as kind of a white hat, participant in that ecosystem. But of course, anyone sitting here, no one's going to say they're a black hat, right? So I do have a view, though, that I liked the word that you use, fear of finding out. That phrase, fear of finding out, and I believe that there's a lot of bad actors in the digital ecosystem, and they may not be malicious actors.
I don't think it's the majority, but I think there are some bad actors interspersed among.
But what I would say, actually,
I could feel we're bad actors.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember they had that special AI model, which wasn't AI model. Funny, I audited an agency once that supposedly had this like machine learning arbitrage model where they were going to buy this and arbitrage that. And I audited, I was brought in by, they hired me to audit them. And then they had no models. There was a bunch of like spreadsheets and like 25-year-olds. It was crazy. I said, you guys are going to get sued. Like you're false advertising.
But I think there are a lot of players in the ad tech ecosystem that might not be deliberately malicious, right? They might not be fraudulent, but they're adding very little value and they're getting paid.
And they're participating value, but they're not adding value.
They're participating in the ad tech tax, right? They're adding cost to a campaign, but they're not adding value to a campaign. And I have a thesis that most agencies are so time starved, right? I think that agencies, by definition, and with that procurement pressure, they just don't have the resources they need to really understand that complex, opaque, fragmented ecosystem that is programmatic advertising. And so they cynically just say, well, you know what? It's all the same. And I think it's the easiest solve for that problem is for them to treat it like a commodity. There's no difference between distillery and any other targeting company. But of course, there are differences. Sometimes they're nuanced, but sometimes there are material differences. And my view of the world is that that AI will be the thing that that flattens the industry. It'll be the thing that allows objective truth telling to the agencies. The agencies won't have to put people on these hundreds of vendors and try to figure out which one of them is adding value and which isn't. The AI will be able to look at the results of the campaign and do it for them. There's a saying in the investment community that I often reference in this part of the discussion, which is Warren Buffett said, when the tide goes out, you see who's swimming naked. And I think that AI will be the tide going out for the ad tech industry and for those vendors who are not adding value to a campaign but are taking compensation. I think that those business models are not going to survive. And I've heard Terry Kawaja say, I'm sure you know Terry, that
Saw Terry last night. Terry's great.
Terry has said that AI will usher in a great reckoning for the ad tech ecosystem. He calls ad tech the Peter Pan industry. It doesn't want to grow up. It's stayed fragmented and opaque, and AI will be the thing that allows agencies and brands to finally understand, well, who is adding value to my campaign and who isn't, and sort the world according to that.
It's funny. I mean, I think that, and by the way, I like you brought up Rocket Fuel's funny. I remember I almost had them as a client. I remember we were pitching some work to them to fix their traffic problem. And then it's funny, we went through 6 rounds of proposals. They kept asking for more and more detail. Finally, can you give us the project plan? Can you give me the roles? And then they called and after weeks, and I was like, this seems off. But then the account guy was, he's my buddy. Don't worry, it's good. They're going to buy. And then they called us. Oh, we took your proposal. They told me this. They took your proposal. We built the team that you suggested. We're going to follow your project plan and do it internally. I mean, that's the type of. That's the mentality of that company. But I don't know. I digress for a second. But I do think though, in order for fraud, for people to care about, for there to be transparency, brands need to want transparency. I think agencies generally want more. I don't think agencies are against transparency, but I agree with you. If the brands are saying to the agencies, all we care about is the lowest, we're going to evaluate you based on your CPM rates with the major pubs, period. And if you're a penny higher, half penny higher, we're going to go with your competitor. I think that race to the bottom has been really challenging. And if agencies can't make money, you're not going to get a good service, right? And then you complain about the service, they're going to try to find money somewhere, right? So I think there's been incentives for, let's say, not the best behavior, driven by behavior of the brands. I totally agree with you on that. But I also think that if brands don't care, this will never change. And I see the opposite behavior. Brands saying, you know what? We'll give you money. We'll tell you the outcomes we want. You figure it out. You turn your knobs. You move things around. And I just think if that's what brands want, maybe they'll get the outcomes they want, right? And maybe the new holdco model is we're going to have a data layer. We're going to have our own orchestration. We're going to cut out ad tech and go buy direct, and we're going to just figure it out. Don't worry. Trust us. Maybe that's what it's going to be.
So I think AI will give the industry an opportunity to move from full-time equivalent compensation bases to performance-based, to outcome-based. And
at the holdco agency level.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it can't happen fast enough. We destroyed the industry when we got rid of commission-based because we entered the era of meter microscope, and we entered the era of putting holding companies and agencies having to find other sources of revenue other than markups on people.
Makes a lot of sense. It's fun. I remember I had one client as a pharma, and they were thinking about transitioning agencies. They eventually put the counter for review. I remember they had just for US campaigns for one brand, they had 200 FTEs managing the account. 200. It's thinking like, what could you do with 200 people? That's an insane number of people. That's like almost a regiment, right? Or is it a regiment 300 or something like that? So it's like, I think I remember thinking, and then apparently they were asking for another 25, which is what set off the account review process. So it was just, I thought it was a shocking number. So I agree with your statement. If agencies could get off that, but how do they do it? Because maybe AI is the way to do it. Because up until today, it is people in platform. Lots of people in platform. It was a joke like it's 22-year-olds working 22 hours a day for $22,000 a year. That's who buys and sells media, right? That is trafficking is done by that group. That's how I started, by the way.
Me too.
So maybe like, but if that happens, like, how do people get into the industry? I guess that's another topic.
We see that even today. Some form of AI has been available on all the big buying platforms for my entire time, the 9 years that I've been at Distillery, right? And
so you guys were in early, in other words.
Well, no, the point I was going to make was that at some of our big partner platforms, the platforms who distribute our data and where we make our data available for agencies and brands to activate it, they have AI tools that will you tell it what your goals are. You give it a seed, some sort of first party data or some sort of media brief that tells the platform what audience you're looking for, and those platforms all have tools that will find you the best audience segments in their marketplace that meet those criteria that you've given.
I think only 3 or 4% of media is actually informed by first party data, which is interesting. I heard that today by another guest.
I don't know if that's true. It's a lot more of our business, but we're a custom audience modeling company.
Yeah, you guys. It sounds like you're ahead, or maybe 6%, but it was like single digits. I remember.
But I'll give you an example on the Trade Desk. The Trade Desk has over 1 million audience segments in its data marketplace and its DMP. And if there's a human being, a 22-year-old, as you said, and who, all good intentions, smart person, working hard on behalf of their client, but if they're trying to find the right audience segment using a keyword search in a DMP that has 1 million segments in it, it's not a humanly processable decision, right? A human can't process 1 million segments. A human can't process.
And they're going to pick the audience they think's good as lifestyle, female influencers. I don't know, and it's going to be or cooking lovers. It's going to be someone who went to cooking site once in 3 months. That's how a lot of these audiences, platform audiences, is pretty bad.
And there's not necessarily a great way for them to understand quality. So I could make I could just make a random segment and call it cooking enthusiasts. And if somebody searched for cooking enthusiasts, they might click that audience and put it onto their campaign. The AI that already exists in these in Trade Desk in particular can do that job better than a human being can. And we know for a fact that the vast majority of campaigns that are activated on Trade Desk are activated with a human being starting with a search box and clicking on the audiences that they think are the best fit. And again, with all good intentions.
So there's a better way to do this.
There's been a better way to do this for years. There has been resistance to it, and I think it goes back to the FTE model, right?
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, coming full circle there. Yeah.
And I do believe it will change. And if it's not going to change because brands want transparency, it will change because brands want fewer people on their campaign.
Or agencies cannot deploy as many people because
of the fee pressure that they're getting from the brands.
Well, I know you both have a taxi to catch.
We do,
which I think is coming in 1 minute. Thank you both for coming back. This is fun. This is one of these conversations I get passionate about because, so I really appreciate the views here and the perspective. It's really awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Rio, and thanks to Brett too.
I'm here with co-host Krish and Raja, who's the founder and CEO of Check.
Indeed. Great to be here.
Yeah, welcome. Stoked to have you here. I knew this was going to be a fun conversation when I was looking at you and your company, and I saw that first, before I jump in, let me have you introduce yourself. I'm sure you can do better justice than I just did.
I somewhat doubt it.
A little bit about yourself and your company.
Sure. So my name is Guy. I started Check about 8 years ago, trying to make the internet a better place, not the entire world. But essentially what we do is we help companies fight fraud, predominantly everywhere that's in the go-to-market, the customer journey. So with whether it's a bot clicking on your ad, wasting your money, or skewing your analytics, or doing even more malicious stuff. We're there to help you fight it.
Founded 8 years ago, and you founded out of Tel Aviv.
Indeed, yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
Yeah, a lot of great tech companies come out of Israel. That's for sure.
yeah.
So founded 8 years ago. When was the original mission to fight ad fraud? Like, how did that whole thing start? Like, what was your background that made you interested and think this would be a good opportunity?
So prior to that, I had been a failed entrepreneur, as most entrepreneurs are eventually. And prior to that, I spent 9 years working for the IDF, for the Defense Intelligence, basically doing intelligence, basically trying to counter non-human traffic, or in some cases also create automations and artificial intelligence. And then I thought it would be fun to start a company that didn't have a product, which is not advisable nowadays. So I started a digital ad agency in the Middle East and North Africa. And I, at that point, had been the only tech entrepreneur who was dumb enough to start a company that wasn't cyber, wasn't tech, and was very focused on customer journey and go to market. And as a tech guy, as a cyber guy, I had witnessed firsthand how cybersecurity is very, very damaging for conversion rates, for the ad industry, for anyone on the customer journey side. So I thought, well, heck, let's sell this company and build a company that actually does have a product. So I started Check, trying to help marketers at the beginning fight anything to do with ad fraud predominantly. And then it worked, surprisingly for us. And we started having customers. And in tech, when you start having traction,
What types of customers were these? Brands? Were these?
Yeah.
Okay.
we decided to only work with brands at the beginning. Since then, I mean, today we've got about 15,000 customers, out of which about 1,000 are, I'd say, global 2,000, global 5,000 brands. And it was easier for us to get to them than to work through the ad agencies. Nowadays, we work with ad agencies as well. And it just catapulted. The need was there. The product market fit was there in spite of us not even realizing it. And in tech, when you get even the very whiff, the beginning of traction, suddenly VCs come in and give you money to go to scale it up. So we started raising funds, and then in 2022 we raised about $150 million and really went to market and really exploded.
Well, do you think, out of interest, when you launch to market and when you're taking your narrative into your customer base, is your customer base like, I get the problem and you're doing it differently, or did they not get the problem?
The latter.
The latter.
Unfortunately for us, it took us a while and a bunch of failures in order to understand how we can help. Basically, at the beginning, we told them, listen, we can solve all your problems, and all we need to do is just a 6 months integration process. And when you tell that to a CMO, they don't necessarily appreciate it. And they're very, very scared that you would hurt their conversion rates and their customer journey, because anything to do with cybersecurity for them means
Right.
friction.
Solving all their problems, and they're nervous about that.
Exactly. Exactly. And funnily enough, since then we started selling to security and identity professionals as well. And these folks, they understand friction. They understand, and they don't necessarily care too much about what the CMO thinks. Whereas the CMO doesn't care about security as much.
Yeah.
So until we kind of figured out how to sell to marketers and how the baked in subject matter expertise need to look like, and literally what the color needs to be, and how big the buttons need to be, and what the pitch needs to be, and how we're saving you money, and how we provide the proof of saving you that money, that became the massive thing.
And is it hard to run those two customer profiles in parallel tracks, because they're so different? I can imagine the same spiel would not land with one or the other the same, you know?
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that hard?
It's incredibly hard. And I
Yeah.
think, have you heard of the term product market fit?
Yeah.
So now there's also founder market fit. And I think nowadays I would I would start the company a bit differently. I wouldn't have had to fail with the pitch as much as I did at the beginning of Check. those are two buyers, two constituents in the buying process, which in itself is difficult and the wrong way to go to market. But we had to. And again, we couldn't sell to any of them at the beginning.
I have a question about that. So like I used to run a team that did media audits, like agency and housing. We did different services for brands who were helping to not, let's say even some of them we do like agency reviews. And for ad fraud, the toughest thing I always found was, and I remember we created this business unit. We thought it'll be easy to sell. You can always find ad fraud, right? You can easily find 20% and you can do it. And you can either recoup that money, get a make good. We thought it'd be the easiest thing to sell. It was so hard to sell.
So hard.
The conclusion I came to was like, people don't want to know. How do you sell it?
Ignorance is bliss.
Fear of finding out, I would call it.
Exactly. I just saw a Cillian Murphy interview where he said, I have ROFO, relief of missing out, or ROMO, sorry, relief of missing out, which I find very difficult to understand. It's amazing how the different personalities lead people to different professions and different preferences, and the difference between FOFO, ROMO, and FOMO. And I find that marketers often have fear of finding out the FOFO thing. And the way to sell to them to a certain extent is just by proof. The proof is in the pudding. So you show them how much they're missing out on when they let fraud in, and you show them how frictionless it could be to solve that problem. And we have competitors, and all of them combined are probably a tenth of our size in terms of revenue. The reason for that is because you need that baked in subject matter expertise in marketing, in digital customer journey, digital go-to-market, in order to solve that problem that we solve frictionlessly.
So is your solution, is it software plus services? Is it just software? How does it typically work?
The vast majority is software. We sit on around 3.2 million websites nowadays on their entire customer journey, like literally every page. And our telemetry.
So your technology is installed in these websites and you can track what's going on. Okay.
Exactly. On a continuous basis. Like we see everything that comes in. And up until about 3 years ago, it was all about, we obviously grew. We were at, I guess, 1 million websites then. But it was about how we can employ very smart nerds to take that data, run machine learning on it, and make decisions on how to catch fraud and how to fight it in a frictionless manner. And then this thing came to be AI, I think it's called. And suddenly we let the models just learn. Have you heard of it, by the way? It's new to me. I mean, it's a new concept. I think it's going to change the world. And we just let the models look at the data, and the amount of data is so massive, and it's not accessible to Claude or ChatGPT. But we run it on Claude, we run it on ChatGPT, and we suddenly see that the AI can do a better job at understanding the different permutation and how to build the honeypots based on that data. And we show that to the customers, and they're shocked, and it works.
Out of interest, has AI, has the way in which it identifies fraud surprised you in any way? Has it done anything that the human staff previously were not doing when they were looking at the data?
Without a friggin' doubt, pardon my French.
Right.
It's mind-boggling to me. It's just nuts. I think I had a unique vantage point kind of to see how amazing AI was, because I wasn't one of the people just using the Claude or ChatGPT chatbots in order to write an email. I had the vantage point to see how it acts on a massive amount of data. And obviously, the better your data is, then the more data you have, the more amazing the results are. So I had a front row seat to see what AI can do. And it amazed me. It amazes me every day.
But it must be. So I remember one thing when we do these media assessments, we look to see what traffic was coming in and where it was. It's hard to tell sometimes, but you could see patterns, right? I'm sure AI,
absolutely,
we use machine learning. I'm sure AI is making it much, much better because it can consume. We used to have people go through it, right? But now you can have AI do it much better, more efficiently than people ever could. And AI could probably also predict patterns, right? So I think that would be an incredible tool. But I also think that AI is probably causing two other shifts. Number one, you're probably seeing much more bot traffic, right? Because of AI. I mean, a lot of that could be good. Some of it could be crawlers. Some of it could be agents representing people, right? So, I'm curious how that's discerned, but also like AI is probably enabling the fraudsters to it's probably like giving them like superpowers now.
Exactly. But it also gives us superpowers. So I'll start with the latter. Our chief anti-fraud engineer, the smartest guy in the company, who's been with me, by the way, in the previous company as well, is called Yossi. And we have about 30 Yossis. None of them are as amazing as Yossi, and we decided to try and build agents that are modeled around Yossi's intelligence, and we call them Yossi GPT. And it's amazing. So whilst I guess you could say AI democratizes fraud. Like in order to build an incredibly sophisticated bot nowadays, you don't need to be a brilliant script kiddie. You can be a guy that never even touched a computer. But with it being said, we're also incredibly more powerful. And we have internally, and we're releasing it to customers in a couple of months, but an AI agent we call Gandalf. And when I say AI agent, I'm basically saying we customized Claude because it's so amazing. And we let Gandalf prepare reports and do a lot of the heavy lifting and find the trends. And what it finds is amazing. And how Gandalf, I don't know if it's a he or she or a they, but so they articulate vis-a-vis the customers what the fraud is and what needs to be done and how it solves is amazing. And it's way more powerful than hundreds of fraud researchers.
Right. So if you were to say like it simplifies it for the customer, it does it faster. Was there anything tangibly different or you like brand new that AI driven analysis was uncovering? If so, like what would be an example?
It basically catapulted our ability to manage scale. Like when you work with 15,000 customers, and we have about 400 employees in the company, and you have 15,000 customers, and fraud is evolving, and the fraudsters are evolving, as you said, and you need to be able to cope with scale. AI bridges that gap.
Right.
Now, regarding, by the way, what else AI does to fraud and to us and to the industry in general, there's this thing called AI agents nowadays, which is an incredible tool. It's not adopted but by my mom just yet. Although I'm pretty sure she'll start buying shoes using an AI agent pretty soon. And these are, as you said, legitimate users in a lot of the cases. And according to Gartner, about 50%, if I'm not mistaken, of the legitimate internet population is going to be non-human now. Mm-hmm. So now you need to discern whether that customer that came in is rogue and has malicious intent, or is it a legitimate user?
Yeah.
It's become so much more difficult. Yeah. That's where we come in with that crazy amount of data and being focused on the customer journey and marketing and so on and so forth, because we probably are the only company in the world that could say this is an AI agent, but also it claims to be working on behalf of Chris. It actually isn't.
Yeah.
And also the intent is not to buy shoes, it's to do something malicious.
Right. Yeah. So this is kind of where my head goes, which is I was pretty happy that my bot signed me up to a bunch of Cannes events a few weeks ago.
Likewise.
I was like, that's saved me so much time. And so that's good intent, but a different mechanic versus malintent. What actually are some patterns that you might observe that are malintent? Like, because all of a sudden a bot is not a bad thing. It's just you need to go one layer deeper.
It's somewhat individual depending on the business. So for instance, if you're Nike and you're selling, again, I'm simplifying it because I abused the example of shoes, and you're selling shoes or sportswear and so on and so forth, the pattern of intent of the user is going to be different than if you're Bank of America and people are either signing up or logging into their accounts. So there are patterns of intent that you would expect for a specific website or app. And if the pattern of behavior of the agent doesn't match it, and again, you already know it's in a lot of cases, by the way, intent is not necessary because you already know that it's an AI agent that claims to be working for Joe Schmo, but you know it's not. That's rogue enough. And in some of the cases, you see the intent just doesn't match the pattern you would expect from a user trying to buy shoes.
Well, Guy, we could go on for a long time. This is a topic I'm actually very interested in, and I know Krish has done a lot of work in too. This has been a great, I think, initial look into it. Thank you for coming by. Spending
Thank
some
you
time
for
with us
having
here
me.
at Signal and Noise. This is cool, and that makes sense to do a longer, in-depth, long-form discussion on ad fraud and what all the stuff we do. And we usually do about 60 to 90 minutes, sometimes even longer on our normal podcast. Let's get in touch about that.
Sounds terrific. This was fun. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. With a special repeat guest, Rob McLaughlin, CEO of Audiences.
Rio, it's great to
Pleasure.
be back.
Good to see you, brother.
Thank you.
So we had such a great time with you in the pod the first time. We thought we want round two.
I'm right here.
We want you back. So good to see you in the south of France. And how's camp been for you so far?
It's been great. Last year was our first, and this year has just been better, more positive, more intense. We had a lovely time.
And hotter too.
It's unbelievable. Although the team back in London and my kids, it's hotter in London.
I heard. Oh, it's got to
Yeah.
be miserable in a big city like that.
Yeah, and they just don't have the sea to
The
take the edge
breeze
off.
or the sea or any of that. Well, I'd love if people could maybe not all of the viewers of this will know who you are or what audiences your company does. Maybe you spend a minute or two on that. That'd be amazing.
My specialist subject. Yeah. 4 years ago, we noticed the saddest thing about our industry, that less than 3% of media that was bought was informed by any form of first-party data. That wasn't us noticing it. It was the holdcos and the independents saying it themselves. And we had a look at why. Deadly cocktail of privacy, security, and the cost, faff of doing anything regarding data and technology. We wanted to solve that. So Audiences is a cloud-native application, runs wherever your data is. Massive news. For the last 4 years, we've run within Google Cloud, AWS, and Azure. And as of several weeks ago, we now also run completely natively in Snowflake, which has been a lovely theme for this week here at Cannes as well.
Sounds like, okay, so I'm going to talk about this a little bit from the lens of using data in our industry. Is that stat real? 3%?
It's from in their own ways.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, we agree, man. Well, we agree it's so ridiculous. It was worth starting a company to solve it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you de-jargon this, we're basically saying that less than 3% of the industry runs on data that originates from source. Okay, right. So this is crazy, right? We've taken so long to get here. How have customers responded to this? Do they get how absurd this is?
Yeah, so advertisers themselves really get it.
Yeah.
They really, really get it. And they've been on like a cycle where they've been frustrated with it and they've tried and then they've given up and maybe they've got a second wind and they're coming back. Which is, we're here for that. Publishers and data owners, they've also been on a whole little cycle of their own. This isn't, and there's no conspiracy theory and there's no baddie in this story, but there's been some interesting stuff. So it's convenient for media owners in some cases, especially the walled gardens, for advertisers not to bring their first party data.
I can confirm it's very low, Krish. It's interesting. We did some work when Amazon launched Amazon Marketing Cloud, which is the media clean room. The stat I heard about a year ago was out of the several thousand brands that had access to a clean room where they could upload first party data, only 1%. I think it was half of 1% actually was doing it. And that's people who are already buying media on retail media, have a place they can store it. That's a clean room 1%, less than that. So it's like the 3% number doesn't surprise me. I think it might even be too high. Right?
Well, and when we unpick it, because it's not our stat, it's in their own ways, each of the holdcos told us themselves. And it's wonderful that in some ways they're motivated to improve. Improve the situation on behalf of the advertiser. Subject for a lovely article, perhaps. The quotable people from each one of the holdcos and some of the indies. And it's a mission. quite something.
So you said that you have some kind of a big announcement or scoop you can give Signal News. We love our scoops here. We had a couple last week. So is that true?
I mean, we're so excited about it. And I know you had Sarah Robertson from Experian, Chief
Awesome
Product
interview. I was on the other day. I believe it's publishing today.
It's amazing. So she's
smart, by the way.
She's the best. And, she's been smart and in this industry and with Experian, making sure they're smart for a long time. Yeah. So, well, the news is audiences are the activation and onboarding pipes for Experian in EMEA, which is very exciting.
Yeah, that is big.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's really big news.
Thank you, man. Yeah. We're amped. We've tried to stay close to Experian for a long time. There's a segue here. Yeah. And Sarah will say it just as clearly herself. Things somewhat accelerated.
With the recent news?
Yeah. Yeah. So, when you are the source of incredible identity and incredible insight, like Experian are, the opportunity to deliver that to the market whilst maintaining your neutrality and promoting the identity spine, the household IDs, which they have, and to do it all in a compliant way at massive scale. I mean, in the end, it's created incredible opportunity for Experian, for us, and for the industry.
Is it, out of interest, what would you say is the talk track to a brand marketer? Is it about less friction in the process of doing this, onboarding this data, or is it the privacy compliance side, or is it something else?
Hey, so first of all, everyone's on board with the value of data and media. And I know on our last time together, we talked about that. So we don't have to preach that. That's good. But yes, it's data privacy and data security, both sides of the Atlantic, UK, mainland Europe. Hey, it's table stakes, and saying that you're trusted with an ISO or a SOC 2, that isn't good enough. Okay. So you have to be very clear that the owner of the data maintains the owner and the only processor if you're going to get things to work quickly. LiveRamp pushed very, very hard and invested huge amounts. And just to circle back onto that stat, they only managed to get, they and the rest of the industry only managed to get, circa 3% of media informed by this data. That hadn't worked. Like onboarding data using third-party technology hasn't worked. So there needed to be a solve for that. Yeah.
But I always thought, like, with looking at LiveRamp, I mean, one of the reasons why they grew so quickly was, originally for Meta, right? They were really if you wanted to onboard data, first party data, Meta, you had to use Ramp ID, and all you're pushing was the Ramp ID. I mean, so I think a lot of the data onboarding with LiveRamp, you get a Ramp ID, you shoot that, which is good because you can match Ramp ID. They have all the integrations with publishers. But I think the limitation was you have brands have a lot more than just Ramp ID, right? They have all this great order history, customer service, all of this rich first party data on their customers that in theory, you'd want that informing your media too, even maybe supply chain information, like in order to inform where you're buying, how much you're bidding. All of that should, in theory, it's there. Why not use it, right?
Hey, look, as an advertiser, my first party data might be this big. Yeah. Emails, HEMS, phone numbers, etc., postal address. Mapping it to Ramp ID only made it go from this to this. Yeah. And then that was the activatable data set. That's not in the interests of the advertiser, that process. And was beautiful coincidence, and like an advisor of ours to us, Nick Dixit, who founded Arbor and coincidentally or not coincidentally sold Arbor to LiveRamp, has always been the proponent of data owners should match their first party data to media first, and then they should look at what incremental they can get from the likes of Ramp ID and other ID providers.
This is, I worked a long time in Australia where the economies of scale on this topic the math never mathed, really, ever. Like we were always selling, our eyes were always bigger than our stomach when it came to trying to actually juice the sale that had been made by a seller. So they would sell a brand onto this dream scenario of customer data onboarding, and we're going to match it. We're going to talk to these people differently. And then exactly like you said, but imagine Australia versus the UK or US. So tell me a little bit, about that, the economies of scale from the approach that you've taken, and some results that you've seen that are just different to this world.
Well, look, it is about, just to use two things in that phrase. It's about a different economic model for onboarding data that you own into media, and it's about scale. Yeah, media, advertising, worship scale. Nothing's changed. Okay, and there have been technical choke points, and Ramp ID is a really good one. You have to be the church of Ramp ID in order to then activate. Okay, we'll break that. Let's break out of that church. Then there's the economic model. Now, bear with me momentarily, but advertising is one of the least rewarding places to onboard data to and to use data. Like direct comms, email, super rewarding. Send out an email campaign, you're probably going to sell some product. Okay, onboard 1 million records into programmatic. Maybe it's better. Okay, and look. I mean, look, and
depending what your match rate is, right?
But
I worked with clients where the match rate was like 2% or 0.5%, right? And like, you're not doing a lot. And then you hope you can build a good lookalike with that. But to your point, right? There's a lot of effort for maybe less reward.
So a lot of effort, and the economics for on using data row by row in direct channels have been very similar to the economics of using data row by row in media. And that's what we had to break. Okay, we had to break that. And that's what, technically, solutions such as ours, which run within the client's cloud and warehouse environment, gives them the ability, without any scale constraint, to push all of the data, all of the identifiers. We talked last time, my view, our house view is that identity resolution is destructive to match rates. Why would you choose an ID? You should bring all the IDs. And when cost is not an option, you bring all of the IDs. When you have an economic model which supports bringing all of your data to media, you bring it at scale. And that's what happens when you connect your cloud and data warehouse directly to DSPs and SSPs. We're not being charitable with our commercial model. We're just saying the hard work is already happening in the storage and compute, and in the office of the CTO. And why don't we make the CMO a stakeholder of the CTO, and you're going to have a really good time.
It's smart. I mean, it's where I think all the waves and tides are moving to: identity as infrastructure, and as more of a propagating it from within the right places within the customer's infrastructure, as opposed to trying to feed it back that way after it's been grown somewhere else.
And by the way, the customer for us and for our industry is the advertiser, is publishers, and is data vendors. All of them have suffered, and like our business, and I think most of us we've all spent quite a lot of time trying to understand the role of first-party data for advertisers. It's great, and that's good work, and we should do that. Publishers and data vendors, their job is monetizing their audience, their data only. They're hyper margin sensitive in a way. I would suggest in a way which is even more acute than for advertisers themselves, and it's they've been some of the biggest losers in this economic model for the last decade, and they can be one of the biggest winners now. And that's why we love to do it for Experian. That's why we love to do it for publishers who are looking to support ad sales.
Any kind of big observations here at Cannes, or things that you were looking forward to that you've seen or not seen? Anything jump out so far? Or what are the conversations you've been having too?
Yeah. So curation and supply side. I mean, this has been building for a while, but
like curation, like that was the thing a couple of years ago. And then like I've had a couple podcasts and people are like, oh, curation didn't work. It was like someone compared it to like a mortgage-backed security recently because it's like sandwiching a bunch of good inventory with a lot of crap inventory and creating a deal ID and passing it on. I don't know if I totally agree with that, but I thought it was funny.
Yeah, it is. It is funny, and it's an important observation. I may be biased, but yeah, I whenever I think about that, I then also think about the conversations with Andrew and Mayora, Index Exchange. These guys are
They're doing some cool stuff over there, especially with
very.
containerization. It is impressive what they're doing. Yeah.
It's so impressive, and they're a very good example. Yeah, they have a great team here in Europe, but the team they brought over from Toronto and New York, we spent a lot of good time with them and with joint customers. So that's something which can facilitate in a way which we haven't previously. We wouldn't do it any other time of the year. And then I would say, our friends, other big data vendors, some specialists in like healthcare and similar. We've been able to meet the wider team on video calls and stuff, but can just accelerates and facilitates. So it's been wonderful to do that.
Yeah. I always tell people when they ask like which event should I go to, I say, if you can only go to one, go to Cannes. It's no brainer. I mean, just, it's something about being, for us Americans, half the people here are Americans, just being away from your time zones, to be in a foreign place with the whole industry, and to be able to like have access to all the people you've always seen remotely, spent time with, but to be in the same place and get all these, to your point, like you're able to sit with Index Exchange together with customers and put these like incredible groups of people together. It's a special event. It really is.
Hey, I think it's more than this, but the geographic thing I think is important. I don't think there is a coming together of European and North American ad tech. Yeah, like this.
Yeah, this is it. Well,
yeah,
Rob, thank you for coming. This was fun, as I thought it would be, and I'm sure there'll be round 3.
Looking forward to it.
And I'm here with my co-host, Krish Raja. Always a pleasure. And we're also here with a special guest who I've known for a long time. And this is one of the interviews, frankly, I was really excited about. Mansoor Basha, welcome.
Thank you.
I'll let him do an intro in a second, but he is the CTO of Stagwell Marketing Cloud, which I understand is recently rebranded to the Marketing Cloud. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Krish and Rio. It's been a long time. We've been in touch, but not had a chance to, have this kind of discussions, which we used to. Like, we used to have a lot of long discussions, and I used to love listening to him go ask questions to other people. So it's nice to see it and turn it all around over here. So just a little bit of intro about myself. My name is Mansoor Basha. I'm part of the Stagwell agency organization. It's 72 to 80 agencies, give and take any given day. Think of me as more of like the software CTO. So I build for the agencies, but also build software or SaaS or agents or AI or whatever you want to call it today directly for brands as well. So we sell both, elements as well as through the services.
So you're selling service. So you're building for the holdco itself as well as for
brands direct.
Okay. And then for those who don't know Stagwell, what year were they founded?
So they're 10 years ago, probably, right? So,
but you're growing fast. I mean, 10 years, and I think it's becoming the joke I always heard was Mark Penn was given a blank check by Steve Ballmer. He just started buying like great agencies and different types of companies he thought would be great together. So, but it's only 10 years. Wow.
Yeah, he quotes this that like if you actually look at the rate of growth of like software companies or whatever, like this is a crazy growth from like, first company he bought was like 4 or 5 million in revenue or something like that. And now we are at a $3.1 billion, revenue mark. So, I don't know about valuations and other things, but because you can see all these aggregations and buy, sell, really a private equity model done right. If you would think about it in 10 years to take it from where it is to here, it's hats off to him and his team.
And so it's an interesting role you have, and it's an interesting background you have, right? Because you're an electrical engineer in a world of ad people, building tools and products in a services world.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is really interesting, right? You're like the unicorn in the room, and
so
have a different take on things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like you have to convince, cajole, coerce, because sometimes people don't understand the intricacies of software, because my vantage point is very different from everybody else's in this industry, because I can go all the way down to the bits and the bytes because I'm an electrical engineer, and then I became a telecom engineer. So I understand system level thinking because we were building 3G and 4G infrastructure and I've coded those systems, and then moved into ad tech, where I understand how in less than 3 milliseconds, how do we push an ad from a DSP to an SSP and out things like that, as well as being able to say, okay, how do we build better software? And I joke that people are like, oh, AI is here right now. I was doing AI coding or whatever in those old days of what we call as expert systems back in 1997. And so it's all evolution, but I can see what is happening. And how do you explain that and articulate that to people who are just getting exposed to it for the first time?
Well, I imagine being a telco engineer would help you with that, right? Because these are such sprawling businesses that have high stakes and the complexity is insane. So I imagine that's helped you out.
That's very interesting, because I came into the ad tech world from mobile advertising. So, I came into mobile infrastructure, then mobile infrastructure became mobile applications. Mobile applications needed mobile advertising then became advertising technology, because now it's not just mobile, it's all these other channels, but similar kind of. So my journey is kind of like that through those.
Must be an interesting time to be in your role now when you look at all of the changes that are going on. I think at really every agency, especially the holdcos. I mean, I work at a holdco too, and it's like the emphasis on building core technology and IP that a holdco can have to help bring to market, to service their clients, to even run their internal operations. That I think we're in the middle of a big paradigm shift. So it must be interesting to be in your role at Stagwell now.
Yeah, I mean, I've been beating the drum. I've been here 4 years, and I've been beating the drum from the first day I came in. And I came from Accenture too, so that was a consulting organization there, and I was working on data AI over there too. So I got to see other industries and other companies and where their moats were and where their difficulties were, and all of them had ponds and puddles, right, of data. And the moat, in some ways, is how you leverage the data, not combine the data. You can combine the data, but if you don't know how to pull out the things which you need out of that, that's the hardest part, right? Everybody is like, because my job is to bring all of this together, get the ponds and the puddles together, and then help people to understand. And I think that's where AI or agents are supposed to help us, is to extract value about what we have.
Are clients, is your goal to build like an architecture that clients can then, or you can build things on top of?
It's a mixture, right? So we offer multiple things. I'll talk about three things which Stagwell is, four things which we are pushing out, right? One is the machine, and the machine is for large enterprises which want to understand how we go to them and go to say, okay, what elements do you have in your infrastructure, and how can we put the machine in there that can sit alongside your Word documents, can sit alongside your Figma or your Adobe infrastructure, and then talk to you and bring you information from somewhere else. So that's one element. Second is the Stagwell agentic targeting system. We partnered with Palantir, where I bring in all the data, push that into the ontology of Palantir so that we can bring in agentic insights so that we can start building better audiences. So, and then push that for activation. For the activation, Stagwell's trying to build this media machine where we are trying to connect all these other ad tech providers so that we can make it agentically possible to send information across there. And lastly, we shouldn't forget that this is all great when we think about from, hey, we have creative, we want to take the creative, we want to find an audience and then push the audience. But don't forget that the public relations comms world also gives you signals. Influencers give you signals, X gives you signals, Reddit signals you get there. How do you take that, understand what's going on, the sentiment, the approach, the human element or the emotional elements of what's going on in the world? Like right now, FIFA is going on hot over here. Like, how does that affect what's going on with those things? And those elements of what's happening over there, how does that translate to actual us moving media and dollars to how to affect that change? So that's another system which we're trying to build, which is called Pulse.
How is the agents negotiating things, performing some of those actions that are done by humans today and in dashboards and platform? How is that? Is that already changing? Is Stagwell already starting to see some automations? And is this agentic trading thing or agentic buying actually starting to happen at Stagwell?
It is beginning. I don't know if we will get there completely. And I have two statements to make on that, right? One is that yes, we are all heading towards that direction. It's easy to say in a POC, or I write a code, or I do vibe coding and I say, look, I can kind of do it this way. But to productionalize it, right, to make it work and scale day in and day out is going to be the next step, which we all have to work towards. What does that mean? That means that what we did yesterday and the rote things which we did yesterday will change today by bringing these things inside. That's the first part. The second part is how you do it, or how that holding company does it, or how this software company does it, or how I do it will be very different. We can't compare each other's solution, because you might say agent, agent, human, agent, human, human. I might say agent, 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 human, agent. Right? Or you might say agent, human, agent, human, agent. Some kind of architecture differs across all of us.
Do you, out of interest, if you fast forward 5 years, 10 years, do you subscribe or believe in Mark Zuckerberg's theory of the entirety of marketing being autonomous and more or less not many humans needing to do the things?
I mean, you need less for two reasons. One, when we think about marketing and the SaaS tools which we have and the silos we have, we need to reduce that, right? Because marketing at the end of the day is, you think, you buy, you come back, right? And so that process, we have overcomplicated it with many silos of that. So if we have to merge these silos, then we need less people, but that doesn't mean that everything can be totally eliminated in that. What we do will change. That means that what we used to do will have to change. So the best way I kind of explain it is by software. We all think, oh, you press a button in software, it works. Yes, but you want the human to check, especially now that AI is not software. AI is probabilistic LLM, language learning model, which is guessing what the next thing it should do.
Yeah.
And it might not guess the right thing every time, maybe.
I guess a different thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if it guesses a different thing, someone needs to be there to evaluate. Okay, fine. I'll build another agent to evaluate this. Now you have to make sure that agent doesn't keep evaluating everything different over there. So there is now suddenly your job has changed, right? Okay, the scope of the capabilities, rather than hiring someone and training them to just press the button, we're going to be training them to think a little bit more.
Yeah, I've been dabbling in building agent fleets, and I let the AI agent I built decide for me what roles these agents should take. And there were not many human roles in there. There was intelligence synthesis, auditor, and systems administrator, and there were. So I guess this is kind of what you mean, right? There's going to be humans that are more systems administrators,
right?
And data dot connectors.
Yeah, I mean, the best example I give is Star Trek: Strange New Worlds episodes. If you see that,
I love that.
Yeah, they have the medic bay. So if you go to the medic bay, there is a doctor, there's the patient, and there's AI, and it's simulating things. And then there are other people standing around who come in and ask questions about how the patient is doing, what's happening with the patient. Did you try this? Did you try that? So there's a discussion and a collaboration going on between the people for the patient, which is the subject, with AI running in the background, doing those tests and providing real-time feedback for this. If we believe, and you said like in the next 5-10 years or something like that, assuming quantum computing comes, right, which is around the corner maybe, I don't know, then it should be able to process all this information at way more faster speed than we can think about, right? I always bring this up about, Microsoft CEO Bill Gates wrote his first book actually was Business at the Speed of Thought. That was the name of the book. That is what we will have to get towards. I think we'll all be in that. Marketing will be at the speed of thought.
Yeah.
But what happens when the AI is even thinking for us? And it's starting to, right? And it's very good. I mean, I'm not suggesting it like it's going to replace human thought, right? But I find it's very interesting how we're getting more comfortable with it doing more things, and it is very good at thinking and reasoning. I mean, it's incredible, the inference capabilities.
So I'll build on that a little bit, which is one of the things I want to remind people, and I remind people and just keep on banging that drum, is that it's not like Google. It sounds simple, right? But you use Google typically to answer a question. Whereas with AI, I find it more useful to get it to ask you questions. And that's kind of if I'm talking to an agency planner, or if I'm talking to someone who's doing mental sort of intellectual strategy work, my encouragement is always, don't ask for the answer, ask for the questions, and then let it extract from you a better output.
Right.
You know,
or I use it to play devil's advocate, right? To tell me, what am I missing? What did I do? Why do you think this is not a good idea? So like you're having a lot more discussions with that. And I think that's where a lot of us need to start changing our behavior, because the way we interrogate, the way we engage with the machine has to change.
That's a really good point. In fact, I've noticed this, and we've talked about it a little bit in the pod, Krish, where like I'm noticing like the experienced people who are using AI, who have like given it plenty of context, given it markdown files, and like are able to ask the right questions, right? And I mean, I think about even how I use it now. I'll put multiple links, I'll drop articles in, and I'll sit and dictate for 10 minutes sometimes. And like what I'm getting, and then I'll take multiple passes through that. What I'm getting, and I'm thinking about things I produce for work, it's quite good. And it's just speeding up. And I think I could have written this, and it's probably like mostly what I would have written, maybe a little different. But then when we're comparing it at work to like what the junior people don't have that context you're getting, there's a big difference. And I think that it shows you I think it illustrates what you're saying, that like having the prior knowledge to bring in and use is it's very powerful. And AI helps you leverage that, if anything.
I think about that a lot, right? Because we are all sitting here and thinking that we are so experienced. So how do we like leverage our experience and think about this? And then we have junior staff or people like that. Or, I teach marketing, a class in marketing. And that's what I'm trying to push in the class over there is, how do you get them to start thinking like us? So what is the process? What's the training? What is the education we need to give to help them to start thinking like us? And does that come just plain by experience, or?
But it worries me. Like, what if it does come by experience, and then like they're not going to get the same, because like you spent years in like working in telco, working as an engineer, like learning this stuff, right? I think about all the years I spent getting yelled at, like building media plans, or actually like analyzing companies, like all that stuff. Like this is decades of knowledge that we have inside. And then I'll pass to Krish. I know you have some. I'm sure you're going to say, I know, because I know you do AI training a lot. So yeah, but I'm sure you have something cool to say. But it makes me wonder.
It does. Look, what you say about knowledge is a really interesting one, and for me, it's incidental knowledge as well. Right, that's the difference. Is when I was little, I would, if I wanted to learn something, or if I was asked to report on a certain topic, I'd have to read the whole beat of encyclopedia, the chapter, and I'd learn random incidental stuff, which I wouldn't really come into any use for another 10 years. And I think it's that incidental knowledge which we might miss out on if we're just asking a question and getting the answer back.
So hold that thought. So let's take that one. That's a good one example, right? What he's saying is that when I was a kid, I was interested in something. I went and got the encyclopedia and I poured through it to get that answer. Bring it back to the 2000s. We have search. We ask a question. We are people who are smart at asking the question can actually make sure that the Google algorithm can give you some of that information, but you still had to pour through all of that information to get that. What we are missing now is, I hear you, Rio, but what I think we are missing now is, how do we leverage AI to make us smarter in through that? So if I don't know anything about the stock market, of how to do shorts or puts or gains, I have to go and work with it to teach me through that process, right? And that is what we have to start training these LLMs to tell us, to interrogate us, to make us to learn this at a faster pace than what we used to do before, which was just based on curiosity. Now that curiosity has to be pushed, and we have to train AI to make us more curious so that we can ask more questions and it can ask us more questions and help us to learn faster.
But I almost think it makes me question like what it means to be human. And what I mean by that is, like, before there was writing and books, people would sit around fires and they would tell stories, and these stories would last for days. And people remember, like,
Right. Memorizing.
the Iliad, the Odyssey, like these epic, Beowulf. People would remember these are like thousands and thousands of words, right? No one can do that today. No one can remember that today, right?
Yeah, I don't remember your phone number.
No, I don't know yours either. I just know Mansoor, and I go to my phone, right? I mean, like, so I can't remember but I remember the phone number I grew up with, right? I mean, I remember my best friend's phone number, right? It's because I needed to. You needed to type them in. So it's like, as technology improves, it gives us leverage, and the skills that we don't need, they atrophy, right? Because we don't work on them. There's still, a human can still do that, but we don't want to. So we lose that skill. I just think I don't know what the outcome is. And I don't even know what my point is besides this is a wild time.
Well, I think my hope on that is that the increased productivity or serendipity, I think we'll get to a point where AI does productively enable people to explore passions, to try adjacent things out, to explore. Serendipity will become a thing inside this technology, and my hope is that in itself creates what you're saying, which is
that is already happening, right? So there's consumer AI and then there's enterprise AI.
Sure.
And there's the statistic that consumer AI adoption is like 40-50% or whatever, and enterprise AI is only like 3%. So everybody is loving tasking, and obviously a therapist, it's their travel buddy and all that stuff.
Yeah, humans have access to the same AIs as enterprises. That's
exactly.
It's so good what we have access to.
But
it's
then
amazing.
Why aren't you using that passion at work? Is that people are not excited about work? I don't know.
Well, I am. I use it to write my emails. I use it for everything. So maybe I'm the outlier. I think we probably all do, right? But
yeah. So I think yes, but why do you do work? So that you can chase your passions. But if you're doing work, how do we make sure you're trained to do the work which we need you to do the work? And that's where we need AI to help us to be trained better to do the work.
AI is making me love my job more. And it's funny because I'm doing the stuff that is boring, like writing an email. I'm a pretty good writer, but it takes a long time to write a good email. Like, I can crank it out, edit it, and be done in like literally 15 seconds. I can dictate what I want, paste it in, get a response. But it's incredible, right? And so it makes me enjoy my job a lot more. So
that's your job, right? Let's take the software engineer's job. We're writing code so that it can help, audience development, figuring out optimization services and things like that. So what does a coder love to do? The coder loves to code. But now you're saying that hey, AI will code it. But now you're telling the worst thing what a coder can do, which is basically tell him, go look at someone else's code and fix it. That's the worst thing you can tell someone.
Yeah, that's
right.
the worst.
Everybody doesn't like doing that. So now, while you might be excited about AI, coding and this whole generation of these people who have to come in have to unlearn the fact that they love coding to start learning how to love the fact that I have to critique someone else's thing.
Yeah.
So how many people love critics, right? Or critics, right? Not many. So this is going to change the way we interact with AI. And I think maybe we can create AI systems which can critique other AI systems, and then we will have to evaluate whether they are critiquing properly or not. Maybe we go back all the way down to Socrates, where they had those kind of discussions, amongst those philosophers. And maybe that's where we go, because we are no longer coding. We are giving thought, we're giving ideas, we're translating what that person's attitude is, debating about different things. And that's probably where a lot more of our thinking needs to go into. And I think that the younger generation needs to develop their brains better this way. And they might be developing their brains better that way in the future for doing those kind of activities.
Well, this is a conversation that I knew it was going to be a fun one. Did not disappoint. I know you probably have to run to your next meeting in a second, and I know we probably have another guest waiting at the door. But this has been awesome. I'd love to continue it on a long form pod, Mansoor. We'll love to get you signed up based on your schedule. But this has been cool seeing you as always.
Yeah,
Thanks
same here.
coming.
Thank you for having me.
Day 4, we're actually about halfway through day 4, and we've got a special guest, Justin, or JB. You prefer to go by,
Let's
right?
go by JB. Sure.
JB, yeah, Justin Bell, JB from who's the global CEO of Credera, which for those of you who do not know is the place I work. It's also Omnicom's transformation consultancy. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you very much, Rio.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Yeah,
I'm glad we're almost over the hump and we're day 4.5.
Yeah,
at this
yeah,
point.
I
We're
feel
almost
it.
there.
Yeah, no worse for the wear, right? For those of you who do not know, we also met a year ago. In fact, it was exactly a year ago, right?
Yep.
I think on Thursday, Caneline's first time I met you, and I was already talking to Omnicom, and I was pretty sure I wanted to go, but then I was like, okay, I want to. And then when the request came in to meet with you, I was like, this is great. I get to meet these guys in person, and went well from my perspective.
Absolutely. It turned out.
So a couple of reasons why I was thrilled to have you on the pod is like I love the fact that you've been in consulting a long time, and you've been through like what I think have been a couple of really pivotal changes in the consulting industry. So I wanted to really dig into that. But maybe before we do that, like maybe you can tell the guests a little bit about yourself that I did not. Did I miss the mark? Sure. Anything I missed? Or
No, good intro. Just quickly, again, Justin Bell or JB, been with Credera now for just about 22 years. So was the 10th employee back a long, long time ago. And it's been quite a wonderful and charmed journey and ride to this point. Live in Dallas, Texas, originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma, but happy to be on.
Great. So when you joined consulting, it was late 90s, right?
Yeah, 1999. Yeah.
Wow. It's changed a lot. And one thing, like, I'd love to hear your take on this. So, like, I think around that time, like, as technology was becoming more important, it seems consulting made this big shift from being more of a strategy management, classic management consulting, right? That you'll read about in like Lords of Strategy books like that, where, PowerPoints or different presentations and not necessarily linked to technology. It seemed like it shifted from that to more like executional, operational, like actual, like helping companies solve their tech problems. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that right as I was entering the field is really at the kind of .com, boom and just pre-bust, kind of time frame. And I think a lot of the consulting industry, really, we all just sort of follow where the money is being spent to a certain extent. And that's where clients began to spend their money, and they needed partners who could not just, hey, we come up with the strategy of, hey, you need to be online and you do that, but more get to the execution. And I think a lot of the consulting industry is also just about how do you enable speed for your clients. And so getting that done faster was the big play during that first sort of chapter. And then, several years later, when the iPhone first came out, and that kicked off a whole new wave of consulting activity associated with helping clients with their mobile strategy and what they do, whether it's for, internal operation and kind of business use, or to your consumer use of what your mobile app and or website experience would be. And then, cloud was next, and that was a whole new chapter of kind of something new there.
It started around 2010, 2012.
Yeah, exactly. And, now we're obviously into a new era at this point with the real, the AI sort of buzz and boom associated with that. But I think you're absolutely right. Like it really was a pivot from pure advisory, and the strategy associated with that to execution becoming a lot more important sort of dimension to what consultants brought to the table.
But like if you could look back and think like maybe 30, 35 years before you got into consulting, you probably didn't even know what it was, right? Or
no.
It was not a career you planned, I'm guessing.
No, it was certainly didn't ever as a child dream of being a consultant. And really it was just throughout college, the consulting firms were some of the more interesting looking opportunities to me because it offered really diversity of work. And when I first got out of school, 21-year-old, had no idea still what I wanted to do. And so as a consultant, I thought, and the promise was you'll get to work on a lot of different things. You'll work with a lot of different industries. You'll solve a lot of different types of problems. And that was the part that was initially appealing to me. And honestly, it's been the part that's kept me interested in it for 26 years now.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I think it's something I really like, the solve problems. I remember when I first started doing consulting, and I'm the same way. Like I'm consulting the way it existed, management consulting existed when I was in college. I didn't even really know what it was, right? And then I think that I certainly would not have expected to become a consultant. I probably was, what is that, right? It's not something I'd planned. And then when I remember when I first got into consulting, still a lot of people out there who don't know what it is. They think, oh, consultant, you meet someone, you work in your basement? Like, you're like, no, actually I work for a firm. And like, well, what do you mean? And I would say like, we help clients solve their tough problems. And my special area of solving those problems is this, right? So it's kind of how I would explain to people. It would resonate a lot of times. Another like, I think big change in consulting that happened. You mentioned cloud, but I think it was around that same time was this kind of pivot from just general helping with technology, like doing big ERPs or CRMs to like actually becoming like working closely with these tech companies, right?
Yeah.
Kind of being their scaled delivery. I mean,
For sure.
that seems like, would you agree with me that was kind of the next big
Yeah. And
evolution?
I think, where I first personally witnessed it was in the e-commerce and content management spaces.
Okay.
So in those areas where you did big, you went from a lot of just custom building of those solutions using open source software and tooling to some platforms like ATG, which is now Oracle Commerce, and things like that, Interwoven and others began to emerge as sort of leaders in the market. And that's when the relationship between consultants and those tech companies started to get a lot tighter, because they, for one, needed to be familiar, needed to be certified, needed to be smart about them. But also, that's when I really think that the software companies, the tech companies began to think of the consulting firms as a bit of an extension of their sales force as a way to get more leverage and more scale and more reach for what they were ultimately trying to push.
Seems to be like when there's those two ways, and you mentioned this recent one with AI, and I think most people would agree that we're going into this something that's the industry is going to look different, just like it looked different before 1999, after 1999, just like it looked different pre 2010 and 2012, and after that, and then I think it's going to look very different in the next few years.
Yeah,
as it shakes out. I love your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. So, I think it is useful to look back in time to sometimes try to help us predict what will happen and adapt to that. And certainly, if you go back to the 90s and the firms that were doing that strategy and advisory, or were only doing ERP type work, as you then got into the early 2000s and the digital and .com sort of evolution and boom, there were real winners and losers that came out of that. There were firms that the industry grew for what it's worth, but there were some firms that went away because they didn't move fast enough into the change and where the puck was headed, so to speak. And this will be no different than that. Certainly, the thing that is seemingly different this go round is this one is just happening faster. It's moving at like warp speed. Where I was just sharing this with someone earlier this week, but we have one long running sales cycle business pursuit with one of our clients that's gone on now for about 7 or 8 months, probably, of quite rigorous work to get ready for this award. And the solution
is just to win the business, right?
Just to win business. We've done that amount of work, But the kind of interesting thing of it is the initial like architecture and solution that we started out with, back in December, is much of it is out of date at this point.
Wow.
Like it's not right or relevant anymore. It was right then. It was the best available known answer.
But the technology has progressed that quickly.
Is moving that fast that we're now having to go back and refresh, parts that were completed 8 months ago. And it just shows you the need for agility, the need for, keep your eyes open and be willing to go adjust and adapt versus thinking it's going to be static in one place, whatever solution you might have had. Like I said, whatever you built 2 years ago is not the right solution anymore, in many use cases.
That is just wild. I mean, I agree. I've never seen things change so quickly. I remember when AI first started too, I was like, God, am I really, at this point in my career, do I really want to learn something new? And I ended up after a couple of days thinking, like, yes, that's exciting as they learn more about it. But I can see why a lot of people who might have the opposite. They're like, oh God, not another thing. Like it's hard to keep. I was just learning the last thing, right? And suddenly it's this new innovation coming. My observation is it's definitely changing the way consultants work. It's already impacting the way we structure teams, probably will even more so. And like there's I read an article and it was an HBR, gained a lot of traction talking about the new consulting model being more of an obelisk, right? Than the pyramid, right? Because a lot of the things junior people did, it's just, you can't justify. I remember when I first started, right? The consulting, Shrey had a similar experience. The partners would say to the junior people, if you're not talking, you're taking notes and you're not talking. Right. It was like you'd show up, you'd take notes, you'd listen, and you spend a couple of years doing that, right?
100%.
I remember so many workshops, I would just take notes and facilitate and move things around and create, Capgemini where I started out, we'd have these brown papers we create, right? And like that was how you spent, but you learn the trade, you learn the craft. And looking back, it was a lot of like busy work, but it was actually really important for me understanding how to become a good
In some ways,
consultant.
it's foundational work, though. It's like
Totally.
that if you skip that foundation, you can't build the house on top of it. And I think that's one of the most interesting things to me about this particular time in our industry is you do hear a lot about the changing of the talent strategy, the talent model from what used to be a highly leveraged, kind of think triangular shaped structure to the organization, and then that was a long time ago even, and then you add kind of offshore, nearshore leverage as well, so you get these highly leveraged teams. Now, if you are able to move, and now there's a lot of evidence to suggest that you can move to either like a diamond model or Obelisque or some new shaped organization, but what I think is going to be most interesting is, if you do that and you really narrow out the more junior entry sort of level people in the organization, where do you then get your senior talent and expertise when you do need them? And I'm really interested to see, like, one of the analogies I go to on this when people talk about like that there'll be way less work to do because AI will do a lot of it, and it theoretically makes sense. But back when I first started doing consulting, and I was doing a lot of software development work on the American Airlines website specifically, and we wrote code with these very primitive text editors. Think about it just like Notepad or something is what you were basically writing in, that had no awareness of the business domain, had no awareness of the syntax of Java or whatever language you were writing in. And then just a couple of years later, these IDEs, integrated development environments, came out, which they did have context. So they understood the business domain. They understood the object model. They understood the data model. They knew the syntax. So that became not important anymore. It made writing code a lot easier. And we wrote way more code. So the amount of engineers dramatically increased during that time frame, even though the tooling came along and
That's a good observation.
And automated a lot of the thinking of that stuff. And yet we hired way more engineers, like probably 10x the number that we had before. And so I'm curious if this will just track to that, meaning, of course, everyone should be using these AI tools to get better, faster, stronger at what they do, whether you're doing research and analysis or you're doing software engineering, or you're doing whatever you're doing, but we'll just do a lot more of it, or will it be different than history and it'll go the other way where it's like, no, in fact, it's kind of your doomsday scenario of like, you don't need it anymore because AI does it all. And I think time will tell, like on which way that really plays itself out.
Yeah, I think there will be some jobs that will certainly be eliminated. I think those are not too hard to predict, right? But I think where, like, you think back to like even there used to be stenographers everywhere, right?
Exactly.
And I think when typewriters and stuff came out, I think it was pretty clear that role would exist, right? But you would never have predicted all the graphic designers, right? No one knew. There've been literally millions of people doing UX and graphic design, where that was something that just illustrators did before, only a few, because it was
didn't
so
really
hard
exist.
to do.
Exactly.
So I think that it's hard to predict the jobs that will create. It's easy to predict the jobs that will potentially be impacted. But even then, it's not that easy. Like there's that famous case study, you mentioned about engineers. It's that famous case study about radiology, right? When they created, it was even pre-AI, it's like machine learning to even like look through images to identify, is this cancer? Is this not? Is this broken? I mean, and like, turns out these machine learning technologies were like slightly better, or sometimes much better than people. You could do it much faster. Everyone's predicting the end of radiology. But there are more radiologists employed today than there were, because there's pent up demand for this.
That's right.
It was unmet. I think with engineering, we're probably going to see that too. There's just more. We never had enough engineers. There was never enough code.
Right.
And I think we're seeing that now.
Well, and another just example of that is, a lot of companies have these old legacy mainframe type systems and applications. There's been this massive concern for decades about how are we going to support those? They're so hard to upgrade if we want to add new things to them. And that workforce that even knew those technologies was aging out of the market. Well, now along come AI, and you can in fact go impact and upgrade and improve those systems with and it used to, if you wanted to go completely rebuild that on new modern cloud architecture or something, would have been literally years and tens of millions of dollars to do it. Well, now that problem becomes a lot more solvable. And so you can actually tackle it with a good team of engineers and architects working with AI tooling, and take on that same thing that would have been 3 years, 30 million, and instead now do it in, 4 months and a few million, and so like, again, you have more things you can go solve. That was like off limits. No one was touching those things before, even though they were holding the company back.
It's running, not well,
That's
but it's running.
But it's running.
Like, why mess around with it? Yeah, I heard there were actually some of the old programming languages, they're translating them into more modern languages. It's wild.
Exactly.
Like, like stuff written in COBOL in like the 60s, right? That's wild. Another thing I wanted to talk about too was the, so you were there, like, for those who don't know, Credera was acquired by Omnicom, which is the global holding company, which is why we're in Cannes, right? In 2018, correct?
That's right. Just almost exactly 7 years from now, or 8 years ago. Sorry.
So obviously there was like our competitor Publicis acquired Sapient a long time ago. So like maybe they were one of the first to do that, but certainly like it's almost 8 years ago that I think this was a foretelling of a big trend.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
In consulting, that I think is becoming certainly to me clear that consultancies are really needed in the agency model. And the agency model is changing, so probably will need more services, systems integration. Love to talk about that a little bit. Like, why did that? How did that happen? And then your thoughts on like has it played out the way you thought it would, and where do you think it's going?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting topic. Just to kind of go back a little bit, pre 2018, I had never heard of Omnicom, and sorry, no offense, Omnicom, but I had not heard of Omnicom.
Most people
didn't know much of the agencies
world
either.
Would not have, right,
and it wasn't the field that I played in. And as we went through our process of trying to sell the company and ultimately doing that, that's when I met Omnicom. We got introduced to them through our bankers and as well as some of the other holding companies at that same time. So there were, the consultancies that were potentially interested in us. There were some private equity companies, and then there were the marketing and advertising holding companies. That was kind of our three buckets. And so obviously the last 8 years have gotten to know the industry and that side of the world a lot better. I think that that convergence that you talked about is as some of the technology shifts have occurred, more things moving to the cloud, more things moving to these SaaS platforms, like Salesforce and Adobe and others that have been over the last couple of decades. And as the need for marketing to leverage a lot more tech and data and now AI to better personalize and better target and to be more efficient in those things, that's when the decision making around technology, buying sort of decisions and what's that roadmap look like has moved. That used to be, for one, not as relevant for marketing 2 or 3 decades ago, but also just those decisions used to be made in IT or somewhere else, and now that started to move, or it's not started to move, it has moved where
it's not just IT anymore.
No,
right?
It's not just IT. They're at the table, certainly, and they're an important player at the table, but the marketing organization, the sales organization have a lot more decision-making authority and a lot more, it's a lot more important to them that they be kind of the leader at that front. And so I think that's one of the things that has sort of led to this convergence of, the consulting firms sort of swimming into that, marketing ecosystem and advertising ecosystem. And then the agencies and the holdcos especially having to swim into the consulting space. So they're all coming together at this intersection where you now have some degree of the creative and if you're the holding companies, the media capabilities and the, digital and CRM and social, but you also have the sort of technical and process and change management rigor that comes from a more classic consulting sort of appeal. And you need both basically to really help clients that are in that, marketing and sales arena.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, it's to your point, as marketing has become much more digital. I mean, 30 years ago, it wasn't digital at all. And then I think, we crossed a tipping point maybe 6-7 years ago where more than 50% of ad spend is digital, and it's just rocketed. So I think it's like 70% or something like that. So I think as has happened, to create those digital experiences, you need Adobe, you need Salesforce, you need all the ad tech players that are here, all these different tools. And the agencies over the years have got, they've become much more technical and digital than they certainly were, right? I mean, as media has shifted, you have people in these media arms that are in platforms all day long. But I think to your point, to really tie things together, deploy a lot of these solutions with some of these players like an Adobe or Salesforce, to do that, that's like the skills to do that, the scaled delivery to do that. I mean, systems integrators and consultants have been building stuff for the last 20 years, right? So so instead of trying to build it, I mean, agencies could try to build it, right? I mean, I just don't think, I think it's been challenging for them. So it makes so much sense with just acquire one.
Right.
right? Either
Exactly.
partner or acquire, and think you're seeing some of the systems integrators, like Accenture, for example, acquired a bunch.
Certainly.
They acquired a programmatic shop, creative shop, Stroke 5. They're certainly looking more like agencies. So there's tons of convergence.
Yep.
It's an interesting time.
Deloitte Digital, similar, some things in that space. And I even think you're seeing the kind of McKinsey, Bain, BCGs that are going further that direction over time.
They're going more into data, more into. I actually see them doing like more delivery now,
exactly.
which is interesting. I don't know if I would say they're great at it, but I would not underestimate.
Right,
That's
exactly.
for sure.
Smart people that good at what they do generally.
Yeah, and like smart people, and
they're newer to it though, so they're having to figure it out, and they're having to figure out how do they match that with their historical brand of being more boardroom sort of strategy type people, and now getting down into the operational delivery it's just a different game.
Yeah, I wrote recently an article called "From Holding Companies to Operating Systems" that talked about the kind of looking at the layers of a modern consulting firm, right? And I guess I was kind of abstract them into, obviously media is still, for Omnicom, I think John Wren said Investors Day, it's still more than half. It's like 60-something% of total of the billings that we have are either media or related to media. And then there's obviously creative and other things associated with media too. But so there's media, which is a part. Then there's like that data layer that we have with Axiom, right? It seems like, Horizon's building Blue, Stagwell's building their market. Everyone's trying to build stuff that's similar, right? Where they have kind of a data assets, and audience data that we can use and deploy to clients to help them, target, measure better. And then there's the kind of execution level, which what we're building with Omni, right? I mean, our competitors have their own versions of that, right? Which is going to be as a lot of things get, I think, agentified. There'll be that, and then I argue that the missing layer was consultant and systems integration, because actually deploy things on top of this layer cake, and then also go to clients and build things for clients that they're going to need in order to actually benefit from this. So I think that was that was kind of my argument. This is where things are going, and again, when I became more of credit, I was like, okay, this actually makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, because if you think about what a client ultimately wants, and that's the way an advertising operating system should be designed around what does the client want and need. That's the way it can be most competitive. That's the way it can best meet their needs and ultimately provide the greatest shareholder return, is if you set it up that way. And they need all those disciplines that you just mentioned. They want us as the holding company, the operating company, to bring certain proprietary data sets and assets. That's how we differentiate in certain instances and add value faster to our clients. But a large number of our enterprise clients at this point don't feel comfortable fully outsourcing what they believe to be their strategic advantage, which might be certain data assets and certain agentic orchestration layers or certain proprietary systems and tools that they have. And so I think that's where you're absolutely right, that we have to have that ability to not only bring our own toys to the table that are valuable to our clients, but know that they're not going to want to just use those. They're also going to have their own things that they permanently own and that are in their environments and that are that belong only to them, and that give them flexibility to work with one or more other agencies as well, and not be completely beholden to this one that creates that. It was a nice moat, when you had it, but I think that moat is getting harder to defend.
Yeah, I for sure it is. And I'm definitely seeing clients realize they expect consulting firms to bring their own IP and assets, to your point. And they expect agencies to do that, right? I mean, and then it's not so crazy to think agencies have their own technology anymore, right? But I think building that technology historically has been tough for them, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's the holding company model where you've got all these different. So even assembling a team to do stuff centrally was, I think, challenging for a lot of.
Well, I mean, think about when you're building your own technology, you also have to think about, you have to maintain that technology, and that's just a discipline that is different, and so you end up competing with the large software and cloud companies that if you compare the R&D budgets and the development teams and the support infrastructure, they're just dramatically different in their size and scale. And so just have to be really thoughtful about what we try to build, and we've built some great tools and platforms inside of Omnicom And I think we also do a good job of realizing what things we shouldn't build, and instead we should go borrow from the hyperscalers and borrow from the SaaS platforms and build for our clients, because they don't make sense for us to try to build and maintain permanently.
Yeah. Remember when I first joined too, I for those who don't know, consulting's going through a period of a lot of change where I think there's dramatic overhiring everywhere because of COVID, right? And there's been kind of this, right when that was starting to get fixed, like then AI hit, and that's completely like, I think, shaken up the consulting model, eaten away the base of the pyramid a little bit. So I think it's made it difficult for consulting firms. So most consulting firms are not doing, like you look at Accenture's stock, right? I just have not been doing great. So I remember it's surprising when I joined Credera, I said we had 90% utilization. So I think part of that is leadership, but I think another part of that too is the fact that something about this model works. We're part of a holdco. A lot of our work, like I think majority of work, like 60% is still outside of Omnicom,
That's right.
right?
Yep.
So we have our own work, but then 40% is coming from them. And since I've been with the company, most of my work. So it's like, okay, well, they're sending us work, and consulting firms don't have that. They don't have this.
Right.
They make it leads from AWS and other in hyperscalers, to your point. But like having a holding company that's bringing us in more and more and more and throwing, even though they can maybe be hard to work with sometimes, the fact is they are pulling us in, we're doing stuff together, we're getting wins together. Plus there's the internal work we're doing. I think it's a model that seems to make sense to me.
No, absolutely. It is a bit of a flywheel that is kind of feeding itself, and in a really positive way, because we certainly it benefits us directly, but also we're able to help our agency partners expand their ground, win more things they wouldn't have necessarily won, and just serve their clients in a way that's really positive. And when we do that, we tend to win again. So that's an important thing to do.
That makes sense. I think we're still perfecting kind of what does the pitch look like, right? Like I see it coming together more, because the pitch has got to be like, we have media, we have data, we have like world-class AI execution and technology. And we also have like the systems integration and like digital know-how that you're going to need in order to like create these, like the infrastructure to support this experience. I think we're getting better at it. But I'm more I see it and we're okay. Wow, this is the model, right?
Well, and it's a lot of why it's the only way you can get to a consistent and comprehensive sort of pitch message is if you have like more of a legitimate operating company. Because if you think about the old holding co structure, it was intentionally siloed because of conflict and things like that in its origin days, and then even just because different people have different incentive structures and different P&Ls and all that, and so there was very little, if any, sharing across. So
sometimes competing.
Yes, absolutely. And so what this one agency in LA was pitching in their story wasn't even considering these other capabilities, and certainly wasn't trying to line up a consistent pitch narrative to what the best of the world is doing at that point. And I think we've really seen that evolve fast over the last even just 12 to 18 months here at Omnicom, in terms of like really beginning to operate as more of one company, sharing the best of, because there are just tremendous capabilities and they continue to emerge across the whole portfolio. And I think we'll continue to see that improve as kind of the underlying model has moved.
Yeah, it's funny. Like right before I joined my last role, 3 of my big clients were agencies, 2 big indies and 1 holdco. So I mean, that came to me and okay, this is changing. I kept getting pulled in because I was always the guy who worked in media. We have a pitch like, we're going to have like media people on here. Like we need someone who's done this before. So I keep getting pulled in a lot because of that. Plus, as I was in the industry. So I think that clued me in on, okay, there's something here. The fact that bringing in these consultants and hiring them, with hyperscaler partners to build stuff for them that they need, and bringing them in to maintain these things. To your point, I sense things were changing. I agreed. I think the last 2 years it's just been like that's gone in hyperdrive. So good can so far.
Yeah, it's been great. Yeah, I mentioned. Earlier, I'm over the heat at this point, but it is great. It's such a good gathering of a lot of amazing people. It's fun to see old friends here that I don't work with every day anymore. And it is really about like just to the point of the change. If you compare, Can from 10 years ago to Can from today, it looks a lot like a MarTech, AdTech, data AI conference at this point. It's a lot of the same players who are at Adobe Summit and AWS reInvent, and
it's almost like 2 different conferences going. There's still a creative. Like people forget. Like many people come here from tech. Like they'll say, okay, like they won't even go into the palette and look at like, because you can go there and they see like all the creatives there. It's super cool.
It is.
To see. They have the history of it down the base. It's. So I tell people who've been there first time, go check it out. even if it's just for like an hour or two.
Absolutely.
On
At least
Thursday
go walk
afternoon.
through, you know, and see it.
Walk through. Like that's where this all started. And
Mhm.
I went to a little black book that was the first beach.
Okay.
And it's like 40 years.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's some crazy story behind it. They started this beach. There was their idea. We're going to just rent the beach. No one had thought of it
Yep.
before. Because the festival used to just be like in the Palais and around here. So they'd set up shop in a part of the beach. But that's all producers. Those are like people who are editors and producers and artists.
Yep.
And it's just totally, I got invited to a lunch for a couple of years. Totally different crowd. People I would never have run into here. It's so funny. And and they were talking about how they'd all been here 20, 30.
Wow.
One guy was here like 40 years, something like that. It was crazy to hear, but I've had a great time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you for spending time here today with
Absolutely.
Signal and Noise. It was this is as fun as I thought it would be. It was awesome to have you here, and safe travels back home.
Yeah, thanks, Rio. Appreciate it.
We're sort of the end of the show, and not many people have had a lot of meetings, but George, you are probably our 8th interview of the day, and we get about 5 more. So George London, the CTO of Upwave, and you guys are sort of on this bleeding edge of measurement, but specifically at the top of the funnel all the way through the outcomes that it inevitably drives. Is that a correct way of describing what Upwave does?
Yeah, we call ourselves a brand outcomes measurement platform. So our core contention is that brand outcomes are outcomes. If you make people aware of a brand, if you make them consider something they wouldn't have considered before, if you make them develop intent to purchase, that's a real measurable outcome that has direct economic value. It's the kind of thing the campaign should be directly targeting. It's the kind of thing you should take a performance mindset towards. You're talking about brand performance. There's so many tools and techniques for optimizing conversions. You should use those same proven techniques for things like driving incremental awareness when they're spending so much money on this top of funnel campaign. To really demand that effect.
And I think one of the things I saw some of your thought leadership where we thought up one of the questions was kind of the bifurcation between brand and performance and how that's kind of bullshit. Yeah. Right. And 100%. And I think the science and the data shows it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of money gets spent on these top of funnel campaigns and all kinds of advertising, but only 5% of people are in the market for any given product at any given time. Yeah. And so you can either assume that 95% of your ad spend is wasted on people who are not in market. Actually realize that all those people are going to be in market eventually. And if you can create those sort of mental availability, those memory structures in a way that you can measure and prove when people are not in market, then when the time comes to make a big purchase, then they're going to be ready to buy that brand.
Yeah. And this is not something new. I mean, this goes way back to the beginning of marketing 101. Understanding the value of unaided brand awareness. And for those that don't know what that is, that's if you see an ad or exposed to an advertisement and then can respond to a survey or an interview and answer what you saw without being given a selection of brands to choose from. Did you see one of these 5 brands? So just off the top of your head, that's considered like the gold standard, I think, of awareness is the unaided, right? Like it was something that was imprinted in my brain through exposure, billboard, television, mobile ad, whatever it might be. And then it has some impact. And I think it's been largely very difficult, right? And I come from Nielsen. We did obviously traditional reach and frequency measurement. I came in from the MarTech ad tech side with Axelate. And then I joined Newstar where we had an MMM, which you can either call media mix modeling or marketing mix modeling, which again tried to track the kind of incremental efficacy, because it was sort of hybridized and combined with our MTA solutions of media spend. Right. And to figure out exactly what you should be crediting, like what you should be weighting from a media channel contribution perspective and what actually might be over, right? You might be giving too much credit to a down funnel action. Look, it could be direct mail. It could be last click with a Google search or, right. And not crediting enough either things like there's exogenous factors like propensity, customer is going to buy that product anyways. Customer is going to go out and get cold iced coffee at Dunkin' Donuts on a hot summer day anyways. They didn't need to be advertised to do it. And so I think there's a lot of interesting sort of science and data, like Byron Sharp talks a lot about this around the impact of brand awareness all the way through eventual conversions, which might be quick time to value, but it also like a car purchase. It might happen once every 3 years, right? So talk to me like how Upwave and how you as a CTO have sort of thought about that? And then how have you architected some of those principles into your product?
Yeah, we're really all about bringing scientific rigor to the measurement of these top of funnel outcomes. So that means really being scientific. It means thinking about experimental design. It means thinking about things like causal inference methodology.
Yeah.
I personally wrote
Experimental design is really important, right? Test and experiment.
It's so important to have a valid exposed group, a valid control group, to understand all the ways that you can get biased if you don't carefully correct for pre-existing differences.
Yeah.
You really need measurement that you can trust because it's guiding millions or sometimes even billions of dollars of decisions about where media spend goes.
Yeah.
It's not something you should treat casually. It's something you should take very seriously.
Yeah.
So the entire platform that we built is designed about making sure that we really capture the exposure, we survey representative people, we do the math in the right way so it's statistically rigorous and believable, and we give actionable recommendations about exactly what they should do if they want to get twice the performance for every dollar spent.
And so tell me the points of data collection. So clearly survey you mentioned, right? That I know the Kantar world and kind of almost single question. There was a kind of single question survey. There's multi-question surveys. There's coming up with a statistically significant sample in order to gather enough data that you can extrapolate out to kind of understand the whole impact of it. How do you guys think about that, and how have you digitized some of that process?
Yeah, so we collect millions of survey responses every year across a wide variety of platforms. Our goal is to get the most representative and broad sample we can. Very carefully at representativeness demographically by age and gender and region and all these kinds of things.
Are these incentivized, or how do you actually distribute and deliver the surveys, and what do they look like?
They are incentivized and rewarded. This time is valuable. They need to be duly compensated for the time they spend sharing their opinion. We try to keep them brief. They usually sort of 2 to 4 minute surveys.
Okay, yeah. So the form factor could be 1 to 3 questions or 3 to 5 questions, depending on the point serving.
Yeah, it's usually called 10 to 20 questions.
Oh, okay, 10 to 20 questions. Okay, yeah.
They're quick hit. It's designed to somebody's doing it on a mobile phone. It's just tap, tap, tap. They can very quickly.
Yeah, and we all get stuff like I get this stuff, and I'm not actually sure all the time who's serving it, but like, are you familiar with one of these 4 platforms? Right,
that's exactly.
It's like Google, Meta, and you're just like, have you recently seen an ad from one of these 5 advertisers? Right.
Yeah.
But oftentimes, with the way I'm seeing them in my end consumer experience on mobile phones frequently, my mobile phone frequently is just a single question before I go into my next step, whatever I'm kind of double clicking into. How do you guys deliver? Do you have single question options? Because I know that the Kantar delivery method for surveys.
It depends on the platform.
Yeah.
So if it's a logged in platform that might already know a fair amount of background information about the customer, sometimes a single question for single KPI is enough. If it's in a logged out experience, then learning a little bit about the demographics of the person for asking questions, access control for pre-existing differences, and maybe the ad is over delivered to older people or certain.
And so this looks on the publisher side? So it's media publisher partners with authenticated traffic or non-authenticated traffic? When you say platform, what do you mean?
So we work across 4 major customer bases: brands, agencies, ad platforms like the Trade Desk, and publishers. And so
that's what you mean by platform. Well, publishers. So the delivery of the mechanism, because you said sign in versus not sign in. That sounds to me like you're at a media publisher site. You're authenticated and Is that what we're talking about?
So I guess I'll draw a distinction between where the ad is served and where the survey is
run.
Yeah,
where the survey is run, exactly. That's.
Sometimes the survey is run on publishers that have logged in traffic.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's run on logged out things. Like, for example, we sometimes survey inside of mobile games.
Yeah.
Somebody might be playing Candy Crush.
Yeah. So I had the right assumption
around.
It's either a place where they're just free, it's ad supported, open web or gaming, and then there's other cases where they might be. Yeah, and those surveys are delivered as 10 questions, 20 questions, because that sounds like a lot of questions to happen in between. Okay. And how what's your reach? I mean, how far does this sort of survey reach go? Is it global? Is it US specific? Is it?
Right now, we're focused on the US and Canada.
Yeah.
The US is just by far the biggest ad market. We feel there's tons of opportunity there.
Yeah.
But probably every 6 months, we ask ourselves, is it time to go international?
Yeah. How old is Upwave at this point? You've been there for 10 years.
I've been there for 10 years. We were founded in 2012, but in a different line of business. We were originally doing inside market research surveys under the company name Servata.
Oh, okay.
But then we realized that the survey platform we had built had this really valuable application of brand lift, and that just sort of, the survey business was growing well, but the brand lift business was growing very fast. And so over time, we just decided to focus entirely on the brand lift business. We rebranded to Upwave and kind of been all in on that.
And so how, from a technical perspective, how are you integrating the results that you're gathering from the survey into kind of a larger marketing analytics or marketing attribution or measurement workflow, right? Like, are you integrating into players that provide MMM and other types of, attribution or analytics solutions? Or are you guys requiring people to like how do you connect the dots between sort of the brand awareness and all the things that you capture there and then the other stages of, let's say, consumer journey?
Yeah, so we try to make it as easy as possible for people to consume their data wherever they want it. So we have a self-serve web dashboard where people can log in, they can slice and dice the data, see charts and tables and all those kinds of things. We also have fully AI-generated PowerPoint wrap reports that are sort of slide decks that summarize the overall performance of the campaign, give you highlights, give you recommendations. Yeah. Because traditionally that's sort of a lot of brand lift has been consumed. So these sort of end of campaign wrap reports, ours are available all the way through the campaign any day on the fly. Yeah. It's all AI generated. We also make our results available through an API so people can download them. So
the data can be ported into like a larger model, like a large.
Yeah, it can be pulled into business intelligence systems and Snowflake, any of these kinds of places. And some publishers, like we work with the Trade Desk, where they're measuring the marketplace, and they pull our data directly through an API and they present it inside of their own interface.
Okay. And then so you guys aren't actually doing any of the connection to, you're not running sort of advanced hybrid MMM or MTA models or anything. Basically, you're responsible for gathering the surveys, aligning that to your kind of key sort of brand awareness specific metrics, right? Which might be 3 or 4 or 5 dimensions, whatever.
Yeah. So we do the lift calculation.
Yeah.
So say, you increase brand awareness by 5 percentage points in this campaign.
Yeah. Incremental lift over exposed versus unexposed audience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We also do reach and sort of on target measurements. So we can say things like, if you were a cat food brand, what percent of your ads were actually or what percent of all the people in the US who own a cat did you manage to reach with your ad campaign? Yeah. Those are 2 core metrics.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we did some research on there, and we started with the MMA, which was called the Mobile Marketing Association previously, but they've rebranded. But they're a heavy sort of industry body around measurement and MTA. Greg Stewart, hello, if you're listening, is the CEO. And we did a lot of research around sort of incrementality, and the impact of multiple factors sort of driving the path to purchase, right? And the value of sort of MTA, but also the value of understanding, when I say the value of MTA, meaning the value of sort of channel contribution. And it included, research into what was the brand impact, the brand awareness impact, down funnel, and the halo effect, that largely, was a lot more important and critical to buying behavior than I think teams critically thought it was, right? Or even the investment dollars. So just an example of that. So I did a bunch of research of both Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, and we looked at 10 years of their data. So we had a hugely statistically significant data piece or their data base or foundation. They've been clients for 10 years. This wasn't just something that they gave to us, but they've been existing clients for multiple years. And our goal was to understand really the value of upper funnel, the brand awareness building, which if you think in the financial services industry, somebody seeing, the Sapphire credit card or the new Amex card or whatever it might be, on television, on some big mass reach, versus in the financial services industry, a lot of their dollars, about 70% of the total budgets, even 80% in some cases, are driven down to direct mail, right? Because it was like direct connection, it's at household level, it's addressed to somebody specific. You get this persistent household identity and person's identity, and they knew they could draw the connection to the actual signing up for a credit card or whatever the product was. in a really linear way, right?
Yeah.
And so, but we actually looked at all the data, crunched it, and we realized that the brand awareness, if you change your media mix from like 80-20 or 70-30 to 50-50, or even 40 to direct mail with the down funnel thing, and 60 to the upper funnel, it actually had a dramatic impact on your incrementality, total ROI of the campaign. And no matter how hard we tried, it was hard to convince them to change themselves internally, to align themselves to like, hey, we've got the math. It proves that you're misunderstanding the impact of Halo. So long-winded way of asking a question, but tell me, like, what is your guiding theory, and what have you seen for client use cases that shows just how important, how critical that upper level metrics, that set of metrics in the upper funnel are to kind of path to purchase?
Yeah, I think we all have this intuition that it matters, but candidly, it has been hard historically to prove it. That case study just mentioned a great example of doing it in a consistent, reliable way is something that still the industry has more work to do on that. The data science team is actually hard at work right now. We got some great retailer data. Looking at some of these CPG clients we've been measuring granular for years. Yeah. And so making these charts showing if you do a big campaign that makes awareness go up, do you see a spike in sales a few months later? And the answer is yes. So far, we're looking forward to being able to publish some case studies, find that linkage, and then turn that into a product that will show across more customers and more product types evaluate scientifically.
Yeah. And do you think there's a challenge between CPG or FMCG for the Brits and retailers in terms of mapping the data to the actual path to purchase, because the CPG firms don't own the data?
Yeah, just things like matching what a retailer calls a product to what the actual seller of the product calls it. Any kind of entity resolution, as we call it, is always a challenge for your going back and forth with one of these retailers multiple times, just trying to figure out exactly which line items should they pull out of the data warehouse that corresponds to the actual products being advertised. Yeah. Interestingly, this is something LLMs are actually particularly helpful for, because you can take a list of 500 product names and 500 different spellings of similar products and just feed it into an LLM to match these things together using common sense. Yeah. That's actually a problem that even like 5 years ago would have been really using machine learning. But now, because LLMs have this common sense intuition, they can actually look at spelling permutations and acronyms. Yeah, like that. It's sort of super powerful predictive analytics to basically ensure that the quality of that match is there and that it's accurate. So you can have just better predictive accuracy of like, is this really driving retail purchases when we don't have necessarily all of the data? So that's super interesting. Well, hey, thanks for coming on the show. We got a super busy schedule. Great to hear what you guys are doing. And I certainly think the key theme here is that halo effect, those brand awareness metrics, you guys seem to be working hard on really proving that does have dramatic impact on the despite what people might think and perceptions and incentives for down funnel budgets. That a balanced media mix is kind of critical to success, long-term success, right? If you put all your dollars in the bottom funnel, you're gonna lose out in the long term. And I think that's a good exercise for a good thing for brands to know and for marketing norms. Just pick fruit and never plant trees. Eventually, you'll just end up with a bunch of overpicked trees and no more fruit. There we go. I think that was a line of one of the lines. We'll catch that as a soundbite and promote that. Hey, thanks for being on the show. Appreciate it. We should certainly do a longer form version. These kind of sessions are kind of power short form sessions. And thanks everybody. And we'll stay tuned for the next episode. And thank you, Lou, for joining. You said you're kind of a friend of the pod, so we can keep this super casual. Lou,
the last person that said I was a friend of the pod on a podcast was Kara Swisher, and it literally changed my career trajectory. Wow. So, and that's a great podcast. I hope that that one you should aspire to be like Pivot. Yeah, it's like that and Lenny's podcast. Yeah, those. So they sort of look at those to say, how do they make some of these wonky topics mass appeal to millions of people? I'm like, wow. But I am happy to be called FOP for you guys. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Well, you helped us start. Actually, you were remember early on. Yeah. And so we come full circle in a lot of ways. And like I think we kind of made it.
You absolutely did. Yeah. I mean, here you're working with a 200-year-old brand, Hearst, a very storied brand. I mean, you guys are. Yeah. You're ballers.
Yeah. Shout out to Hearst. I mean,
shout out to Hearst. Shout out to Hearst.
Thank you, Hearst. Sherry.
Thank you for the air conditioning, Sherry.
Oh, yeah. And the AC has been good. Studio's been great. So, okay. So Canada's pretty much a wrap. I mean, like after this, we're going to go get some Negronis. Right? Yes. I mean, that's kind of our plan. So
Thoughts?
I think that, if I had to summarize Cannes this year, I would say The Humans Strike Back, if you're a Star Wars fan. Last year, agents are going to take my job, agents are going to take your job, agents are going to take everybody's job. It was like declining a Latin verb. And this year, you know what? I think the analogy that I like the best, and I got this from Jay Ultra at MasterCard, AI isn't a tool. It's an instrument. A hammer is a tool. You pick up a hammer, you know how to use it. There's never been instructions on a hammer in all of human history. But an instrument you need to learn to play. A Stradivarius will not make beautiful noise if you and I pick it up and start, running a bow over it. But with years of patient practice and prompting, it actually makes beautiful music. And that's exactly what an AI will do. And so you've got that talk track coming, that it's going to be an empowerment tool, it's going to be an enablement tool, but the human in the loop is essential. And at the same time, you've got the creator talk track. There are twice as many creators here this year as there were last year, according to Scott Galloway. I'm sure it was very scientific research,
including us, right?
Including
That's
us.
right.
I
You
guess we're
guys
sort
are
of
too
weirdly influenced.
Wow, this is so meta. It is so meta. And I don't mean, by the way, the people who own Facebook. I just want to be clarified there on what meta used to be before Mark Zuckerberg stole it. So I'm feeling really good about the trajectory of the industry. Do I think that there will be job loss? Yes. But I think that job loss will ultimately lead to new types of jobs. I do think we're in the midst of the renaissance of marketing. And as a result of that, those sort of repetition jobs, those jobs that require a lot of, exculpatory work, doing Google, doing research, they'll go away. But what we'll be able to do with the research, how we'll be able to apply it, how we'll be able to think about new use cases for our business, new roles for the agency, new extensions for the brand, that's where the cognitive time of the human in the loop will actually be freed up.
Yeah.
Now, your next question is going to be, but Lou, what happens to pipeline of young talent? I am worried about that.
Yeah.
Because all of us are going to be fine. We've been doing this a long time. We have
because we can play the role of conductor or strategic systems thinker.
Better because of AI, but you're right. The young people, I think, struggle to use it more because they don't have the context or experience, and also they're not getting hired in numbers now. That may change.
In domain expertise, they don't have the domain expertise.
But I think you both hit it. It's the perspective. It's the wisdom. It's the I can look at how this is evolving, create parallels with previous experience in my career, and advise my clients how to navigate it, right? And probably be more right than wrong. I'm not going to be right all the time. Nobody is. Anybody who says they have all the answers at this can is absolutely, avoid those people.
Yeah.
Right? But it is, what a wonderful time to be in the business. We are reinventing how we go to market.
Yeah. And we're kind of figuring it out in real time.
Yes. And the model that works for signal and noise may not be the model that works for somebody else. And that's great. We stop trying to commoditize everything. If you think about this business, it was always about creating edges, creating little points of difference. Think small, the original iconic campaign that Bill Bernbach came out with to launch the Volkswagen, right?
Yeah.
That was a completely different way of thinking. By the way, AI would have never come up with that.
Yeah.
You needed the human for the idea. Now you could version the hell out of it with AI. Just the way that Andy Warhol took the Campbell soup can and versioned the hell out of it.
Oh, you're taking that from our ad week panel together, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
Can a human do this? Even though it seems like a repetitive motion to take something that was iconic but super simple, a consumer brand, and just duplicate it through silkscreen 100 times. You think, oh, that's a versioning experiment. Yeah, I can do it. But it's the idea behind that.
And I'll give you a provocation on that. Creative is a new segmentation.
Creative is the new segmentation. Define that.
So the idea is that I have an idea, and I want to contextualize it for all the different audiences that I want to serve with my product or service. So I might change the wording, I might change the background image, I might change the offer, whatever it might be to appeal to those different groups. So the creative finds its audience. It's not, it actually becomes the dynamic that drives the reach, that drives it's kind of how creators work.
Less so than the pure audience data and the segmentation schema and all that stuff.
You just use a very big oxymoronic term. There is no such thing as pure audience data.
Yeah.
Because the cost of producing content is collapsed to close to zero, or is collapsing close to zero, you can try to almost infinite variance. You can push that. You can see how that was always the promise of digital, right?
Right. But we were, my team would come up with 16 different targeting scenarios, and we'd have two assets. We'd have an upper funnel asset and a mid funnel asset.
Especially good luck getting them design,
Yeah,
approved.
yeah. And
put in your
IndyCar,
system. This is
the cost was prohibitive because of things like rate cards, where you had, again, going back to the Renaissance analogy, almost a guild back at the, you had the production house, and you had all the people that had to touch the piece of creative before it went out the door, and the approval cycle. Now, I do think the next big frontier, and we talked a little about this at CES, if I'm not mistaken, is real-time agentic governance. You're going to need to govern these creative assets to ensure that they comport with the brand ethos. I don't think that they should be slaves to the brand guideline. Those are different things. But do they represent the brand in a way that is accretive to what we're trying to build for the brand? Do they comply with regulation that that we need to navigate if we're in a regulated category? In order to take full advantage of what we're talking about with the infinite creative examples, infinite number of creative assets approaching zero cost, we're going to have a governance mechanism that's just as fast.
Well, yeah, and are they relevant to all the micro audiences and the micro targets that you have? Because the system's going to break. When you automate the system, it's going to break at times. But if you've got this governance layer, an agentic governance layer that ensures that, hey, when it breaks, we're sending an irrelevant ad to an audience that might be a small audience. Like we talked to pharma executives like all week long, and they've got these micro targeted audience with people that have specific, 5 million people in the entire country have this thing, but that advertisement.
So how was your conversation with John von Brockel? Is that who you talked to? Yeah.
What was
Von Brockel runs he runs content for Novartis, and it's exactly what he works on. He and I used to work here at Bank of America, and he's like creating content for doctors, and it's almost like fingerprinting them, because if you read that, if you consume that content, you're a doctor of whatever disease this is, and it's fascinating. I mean, it's anyhow. You ask the questions, I'll get the answer.
So Lou, I know we're going to be booted out of this.
Oh my God,
studio. We're 1 minute over, but any kind of. And by the way, thanks again for joining us. Always a pleasure. We wore the hats.
Thank you for wearing the hats and making me feel good about mine. Yeah. I'm dying to do this though for this last segment. Oh my God, you need a little bit.
You know what happened? It was like that, but like I on the plane actually fell asleep and I put it down, and like the guy next to me crushed it. Yeah. So it was. I need to probably get a little.
I had that happen to a hat.
So it was annoying, but I felt bad. I let the hat fall. But
you can't mistreat a hat, right? What do you think of this? Is this a little too Crocodile Dundee, a little too, or does it fit?
I think it works really good with your personality. You've always been a bit of a maverick. It's a Brett Maverick hat, if you get the James Garner reference.
Oh wow, that is a soundbite we're definitely going to move on. I like that. No,
but that's always been you.
Yeah, and it's weird because you put this on, and I'm like, this seems a little loud, but I think my personality is a little loud.
I have to wear hats.
a little loud.
I have to wear hats for avoiding sunburn on my bald head, and as a baldness avoidance device. But I don't have to wear loud hats. This is not that loud, but I brought some loud ones. I'm like, this is a marketing conference. You want to stand out. Yeah. Do you want to hide in the herd, or do you want to be the hat man? I'm the hat man. Yeah. You can be the hat man too. Anyhow.
Well, someone at Omnicom called me the LinkedIn guy.
No, that's Mattarella.
Yeah, I don't know if I
was it Mattarella?
No, but
no, that's the LinkedIn.
I don't know if I want to be the LinkedIn.
Oh, that's Mattarella is the.
But with that note, thanks again, Lou. And cans close.
Cans to close. Yeah, and I think your overall perspective is that it's a really exciting time to be in this industry.
It's an exciting time to be in this industry, and I would just say one last thing. We all have these friends who are like, hate having to come to Cannes. This is my last Cannes.
Oh, boo-hoo, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, you know what? The only thing worse than having to come to Cannes is not getting to go to Cannes. And 99% of people have that problem. So get over yourself. Enjoy the fact that we are a community of people who are working together to figure out a whole new frontier for our business and invent the next 50 years of how marketing impacts commerce globally. Get over yourself.
To get to hang out with the most fun, interesting, creative people from all over the world, in the south of France, even if it's hot.
Right. Oh, and it's hot, by the way. Boo-hoo, it's hot.
Yeah. It's not hot compared to Japan, but I think my wife is like, get over it. You're like half Japanese. It's not that hot there, and I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. It's not that bad. But I think again, and I think that's part of the mission statement, and I think you kind of nailed it to signal and noise. Our idea is that like, hey, we don't know it all. You don't know it all, but the more that we're talking around these topics and in digging and interrogating our assumptions.
I know you're trying to wrap, and I understand the time thing, but my whole point is, I think that's why everybody's so accessible this year. People realize that collaboration and different perspectives are going to help them figure this out, right?
Yeah.
Everybody is talking to everybody else. I had no trouble getting meetings with extremely senior people for my clients because they're as interested in how we're thinking about a problem as the solution we're trying to sell them, right? They're interested in the denominator. We want to sell the numerator. right?
Yeah.
If you get the analogy, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, what's your worldview? How are you framing this out?
Yeah.
Okay, what are you doing against that worldview? And it makes it exciting again. I've been in this business 36 years, and we're changing the rules in real time for the first time in those 36 rules.
Yeah, and it doesn't just apply to marketing. Everything they were talking about from a data infrastructure perspective, from a decisioning perspective, from an agentic perspective, applies to hard tech, AI.
AI is doing all the bullshit I never liked to do.
I got news for you. I have a belief that marketing may become the enterprise OS. The enterprise OS, because we understand the customer. We're wired to create things that appeal to the customer, to cultivate the relationship, to build demand for our products and brand. I think that informs everything from customer service to new product design to everything to potential of the CFO's projection. Marketing may become, because remember, marketing generates more behavioral data than every other aspect of the enterprise as media exhaust.
Yeah.
And if we can harness that and put it into our proprietary LLM and understand where the puck is going and help the entire enterprise get there ahead of our competitor, we are the new OS for the enterprise.
Yeah. Data is the new operating layer, right? It is the car. It's not the oil that goes into the car,
Exactly
right? And that data layer that's being built, and the governance layer on top of it, and then the skills layer on top of that, which is kind of your agents or your composable solutions, right? All that stuff is the same stuff that's going to go into robotics, into hard tech, right? All these decisioning ecosystems. It might be living in media and gaming, right? The gaming ecosystem has a lot of innovation.
But it's all in the service of understanding the customer better and meeting their needs better. And that is the core capability of marketing, going back to the dawn of marketing.
You should inform your products. You should inform the way you run your organization. A lot of the AI, people, I think people realize a lot of what's happening with AI now. It's going to result. A lot of it really is how you organize your company.
Yeah. I think that's the last great barrier to AI adoption is workflow and org design, because I spent my career helping with role clarity and avoiding role ambiguity, because that creates job dissatisfaction. I think the next generation is going to have to work across the entire curriculum at an unprecedented scale, and they're going to have to be very comfortable with the fact that we're all doing the same thing, sort of.
Yeah,
and we're each getting there differently. And that's okay. It's not a threat to my job. It's actually, we win as a team.
Yeah. Death of specialization, right? It's the hyphenated job title.
Death of specialization.
Right. Yeah. You're going to have to be multi-talented across multiple things. And so some of us in our lives have become jack of all trades, sort of master of none. Yeah. It's actually valuable when you start to have the ability to compare.
Yeah. And again, I think that's why we survive, because we have perspective, we have wisdom. We've been through it all. I spend most of my time diagnosing problems, and all I do is like, I saw that about 4 years ago when I was in this role and doing that thing. I love this time. It's the greatest time to be in the industry. Thank you guys for ending your can with me. I know we got to get kicked out here, so I'm ending on your behalf, but I always enjoy having a chat with you, even if it's rough.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone.
Running solo for this particular interview with Melissa Anderson, the president of Search.com, now owned by Ad.com. And Public Good fits into there somewhere. Public Good's the company that you founded?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. And you were purchased by Ad.com, and now Search.com is sort of a category. It's now underneath the Public Good brand.
Yeah, that's the division. Yeah.
Did I get the brain higher?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, we were.
I can't believe you got that after like a 30-second conversation. I'm trying to put it all together.
Yeah, we were actually acquired about this week last year. So it's been a year.
And you guys are doing, just so that the audience understands, you give me sort of a really good understanding of what Search.com is doing. It's an LLM that's ad supported, so I'm going to call it FAST for LLM. You should probably
or Gen AI chat is used.
Gen AI chat,
where user comes in, and rather than having a list of search results, you go and you have a conversation, and you get a conversation back.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about the monetization strategy around that, just so people understand that. Then we'll get into some of your perspectives on Gen AI in general, some of the hype out there. Let's try to get through the signal and dispel the noise. So tell me a little bit about how that works from a monetization perspective, right? How you're using ads, because this is a hot topic in the industry. And all the LLMs are saying, well, we're leveraging a lot of debt to hyper scale and to build out all these data centers. How on earth are we going to, outside of subscription models, $20, $200, whatever it might be? How do we actually make it? We're tokenization, right? For the code elements, the codex, the clock code. How do we actually monetize? And so it's a super hot topic. the rudimentary releases from an advertising perspective, from ChatGPT, and I've heard people that talked to people who used it. Right, it's relatively nascent, and then maybe an understatement. What you showed me on your phone was pretty cool looking. So tell me, like, sort of the genesis of that solution. You kind of are a challenger brand in like a super competitive space with some very big players, like Sam Altman, and Dario. So tell us a little bit.
Yeah, we are a challenger brand, right?
Yeah.
It's the David and Goliath thing, but we were first to market.
Yeah.
So we launched Search.com over a year ago.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we were first to market
From an ad supported perspective.
From an ad supported perspective, thank you. Yeah, so we really we actually come to it from a very unique perspective. So a lot of people are talking about monetization. There's a lot of debate around whether ads are a good or a bad idea being in it. Lots to say about that.
Yeah.
But kind of our unique vantage point is looking at it actually from a values perspective.
Yeah.
So if you're, Search.com is part of Public Good, a division of Public Good. Public Good is an AI for good platform. So like, what does that mean? And how does that relate to Gen AI? And the answer is, if you're charging a subscription from a values-based perspective, then you're not allowing equitable access to knowledge.
Yeah.
So the more you can pay, actually, like the better information you get, and the less you can pay, the lower model you get. And then if you can't put your hand in your wallet to afford it, then you're not getting
the
knowledge
slightly
at all.
outdated model. It's not as fast. It doesn't give you the same sort of decisioning capability, deep learning capability.
Yeah.
The more expensive. So
And this is not a great time
it-
in our economy.
Yeah.
And so you think about, we are limiting access to knowledge, and no one's having that conversation.
Yeah.
And so that's the piece that by having an ad supported model, obviously we're giving brands the opportunity to be in these high intent moments, and break through. But from a consumer perspective, we're giving unlimited access to information and up to 10% cash back on things that they purchase within the model.
Yeah.
So if you think about, you mentioned ChatGPT and OpenAI, they certainly are the elephant in the space.
Yeah.
But, it is a bit of
And Claude. Claude might be the elephant, but there's two elephants.
Complexity,
Two of them.
Gemini, there's a few of those guys out there.
Yeah.
But
And Gemini is so integrated into people's workspaces and work lives, right? They have a kind of an inherent advantage. And I think their ad supported models, it's already built because it's sort of an expansion of search.
Yeah.
So I think from a user experience perspective, where I go into Gemini and I see, kind of the slightly expanded Gemini search bar, right? It's a very familiar user experience because we grew up on Google, right? And you still get the blue links,
right,
but you get them in this context where it's not interrupting the actual chat experience. I think that's what people are most concerned with. So how do you guys think about, how do we deliver a good user experience in an environment where people are doing, in some cases, a lot of cases, are not going to be product specific searches. You might say, I'm looking for a handbag, or I'm looking to go on a vacation XYZ.
Yeah.
How do you guys think about that in terms of like the integrity of the results?
Yeah, I love that. And I want to talk about that. Because, I thought it was a cheap shot when Anthropic came out with the commercial this year, the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Which is basically, the implication was that
the Cougar Mom was pretty funny.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, that's hilarious, right? Because it seemed like they were saying, you're going to show an irrelevant ad to somebody that's asking a very specific question that wants a very specific answer, but you're actually going to advertise something that is maybe tangentially related. So to me, that got to this point about like context is king.
Well, I thought the implication of that ad was that the brand could kind of affect the answer.
Yeah.
And that is not the case. And it's actually caused a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
So, brands often ask me, can we affect the answer? And the answer is, not on our platform, Search.com, but not in any of the LLMs. It's like separation of church and state here.
Yeah.
There's the editorial, and then there's the ability to show ads. Of course, a good GEO strategy for brands can help inform that answer, but you can't buy your way into it. However, you can leapfrog that consumer's attention by serving an ad.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you, so that particular perspective. So tell me how the monetization strategy looks like. So you've got publishers that you partner with that provide content, right? Which helps power sort of the validity of the answers. Are you also doing kind of general web crawls and the like, in order to pull in answers and
Yeah. So great question. And I'm going to circle back to the values-based perspective. Yeah. So from a publisher point of view, we're not stealing scraping content, right? We have strategic partnerships with a number of publishers. One of our most recent favorites is wealth.com. And so what we're doing is we're ingesting their content into the answer and providing an attribution. so that you know where that content came from.
Yeah.
And so our goal is to support journalism and support publishers. One, give them credit for the content. And two, we provide a revenue share back to the publisher for any, ad opportunities that are served within that content. And that's just really important in the world of publishing. I mean, geez, the world of publishing has been tough.
Yeah. And that's cost per click revenue share.
Yeah, it's a cost per click revenue share.
Yeah.
Our publishers are getting 60% of the revenue
and then
for any ad within content that they contributed. And I think the reason that this content is so important is that, we are in a time of eroding trust.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's definitely a big topic.
It's a big topic, right? And so, there's a monetization opportunity for the publisher, but there's also the opportunity for that brand to stand for trust. So now you know where the information came from.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things about the LL model is that, garbage in, garbage out, good content in, good content out. But when the consumer can see the publisher that it came from, and our goal is to have as much publisher contributed content,
it's less
and
of
the answer is possible.
it's less of black box, right, for the consumers, and it also helps from a brand awareness, brand bias, or brand validity or credibility standpoint to really show, like for publishers to show their name associated with the knowledge that you're disseminating.
Absolutely. And you asked me about the kind of monetization, how do we think about those, I call them moments of motivation.
Yeah.
And so, one of my favorite queries that I showed you right before it came in was, I might be in the market for skincare. I want to use my FSA account. So, hey, what kind of skincare is FSA eligible?
Yeah.
Right. But that's a great moment, or that's a moment of motivation when people are looking for what they can purchase, or a brand to show up within that moment of motivation.
Yeah.
And, to your point about, it being intrusive or consumers being concerned about ads, it's like ads have always been like, don't be irrelevant, right? If it's irrelevant, it's a moment of motivation. If it's irrelevant, then it's distracting.
Yeah, as long as you're not polluting the quality of the content.
Exactly. Again,
are you answering my question fundamentally?
Yeah,
right?
And don't oversaturate.
Yeah, and then I saw that there's also kind of hyperlinks or links within the content for products, right?
Yeah.
So it's sort of like product positioning, product placement within the editorial content, right? It's not being forced in there.
That's right. You can
it's just
choose to click or to not click.
Right. And then how does that model look in terms of driving traffic, let's say, to a retailer site? What does that monetization model look like?
From a revenue perspective?
Yeah, from a revenue perspective.
Yeah, so it's cost per click. So unlike some other folks that have come into the space with different models.
They're paying you for the cost per click.
Yeah, we're a pure performance model.
Yeah.
And the way we think about the world is, outperforming the Googles and the ChatGPTs of the world.
Yeah.
So we're a less saturated platform, which gives us the ability to still provide massive scale, but to provide it at a more effective rate to our advertisers.
Yeah. And the advertisers are paying it cost per click, and the publishers are sharing in that revenue. Yeah. I was sure for some reason I was bifurcating the product links versus the publisher specific links.
Right.
I was kind of putting those in two different camps, but in reality, any click is that some of that revenue the advertiser's paying is being shared with
the publisher. Yeah. And for the publisher, look, if people want to, there's some contributed content in the answer and they want to double down and read more, then they can click out to the publisher site.
Yeah.
So not only are we providing a revenue share, but also the opportunity for people to read more. And so it's really, it always boils down to consumer experience.
Yeah.
Right. And what this model allows for is people to, dig in and go where they want to go, but also to provide, a very seamless experience. To answer the questions. And sorry.
Yeah. And so what do you think about so there's a big theme that Rio and I talk on the time about publishers losing, and in the last 25 years they've lost 50% of their total revenue.
Yeah.
And it just seems to be getting worse. It was first the walled gardens, right? They were capturing the audience, they're capturing data and keeping audiences in their walled gardens, whether it's a Meta or a Google, keeping them engaged, right? And algorithmically doing that, driving that engagement and that sort of lifetime value, I guess, right? And then you have the LLMs that are pulling content from Reddit and multiple sources.
Yeah, and no clicks.
Right, in Wikipedia.
Yeah.
And they're not giving back to the publishers. And so the publishers are losing that direct traffic.
Yeah.
Which organic direct traffic was often how news publishers get 100%. Content. There's a subscription model in some cases. There's a lot of them that use authenticated traffic to build their subscriber bases, like Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, that have done successful, but like a fraction of the revenue that the walled gardens make. I mean, an exponential fraction of the revenue that Meta or Google makes. So how are you guys, what from a mission statement and goal perspective, are you trying to kind of bring back some of that monetization capability and power back to the publishers.
Yeah,
to
100%.
support their thriving and surviving.
Yeah, I mean, look, there is a scenario here where there's three stakeholders and everyone wins.
Yeah.
The consumer has free access to knowledge,
Yeah.
right? The publisher gets a share of the revenue.
Yeah.
And the advertisers are able to reach people in moments of motivation. And you see that in the traditional model, like it's often broken for someone, right? It's, right now ChatGPT doesn't allow the pharma industry with it, so they're walled out, or the publishers getting their content stolen. But in our scenario, it's really about all stakeholders win.
Yep, that's great. And so what are sort of what's the adoption been like in terms of what, because adoption is a big thing. We see how much usage there is in Gemini, especially in the work environments across ChatGPT.
Yeah.
They're huge numbers.
Yes.
Grown massively for a very short period of time.
Yeah.
So what is Search.com seeing, and what does the future look like?
Yeah, I mean, we're scaling. So we've got 4 million daily active users, but our goal isn't to be as big as ChatGPT, or necessarily any of the 4 LLMs. Our goal is to provide an amazing experience for our advertisers, our publishers, and the consumer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
you can play in the niche.
We're a different model. We're an advertising company. We're not a lot. And I think that's why, it was a struggle for Perplexity to move into ad land, and I think ChatGPT is, figuring it out.
Yeah.
But we're just so well positioned because, our parent company was born 30 years ago. So we've got a network of publishers, a network of advertisers. So then it's just a matter of turning it on because our DNA.
And they've owned that domain all this time, at.com and search.com.
That's a great question. I don't know
that if you were domain parking one of those URLs 25, 30 years ago in the 90s, you were, right? All this time, you could sell that for tens of millions. Hundreds of millions. So that's really interesting. It sounds like you guys are sort of leading the charge, at least from a small challenger brand perspective.
Yeah, from
an advertising model that offers value. And as long as I think the end results, the consumers not feeling like they're having an interruptive advertising experience. They're having an authentic, true editorial experience or answer experience with when they're trying to ask a question or discover something.
Yeah.
Right. As long as that's not polluted. And is there a governance system that ensures that the answers kind of remain high quality and aren't, there's got to be a Chinese wall in terms of the answers that are delivered in the sort of advertiser incentives. So how do you guys manage that governance?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the short answer is we actually have an API through to all 4 large language models. So we haven't built a new LLM from scratch. Again, our DNA is serving advertisers, being more effective.
So you're leveraging the compute.
We have an API through, and we pull in, and then we have the ability to serve the most relevant, best answer of the 4 of them through our proprietary technology, looking at it. And then we ingest the publisher content, we ingest the ad opportunities, and that's the end result that the consumer sees. So the governance is really around, we're kind of starting with that LLM answer, but then we're adding that trusted publisher content on top. And then the ad is kind of the final step. And I think that, you were asking before what I think about the world of publishing. It's been hard for a long time, but I'm the ultimate optimist. But I think, as trust continues to erode, I think, for publishers, it's coming back, right? It's for a trusted model. And I think the publishers have also done a good job, pushing back on the LLM models that are scraping the stolen content. And now licensing fees are becoming, more common.
Authentication and subscription.
I mean, the industry could start like that, but it couldn't continue like that. So I think that there, hopefully, is a bright road ahead.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know we were delayed. It's been a crazy Thursday.
It is so hot.
It's so hot. We got the air conditioning in here. Thanks for joining. And everybody, stay tuned for the next episode on day 4 of Cannes Lions, and we'll see you soon.
It's been a pleasure.
And now I've got Vinod Kashyap. Got it right. The Chief Product Officer of Digital Envoy. Which you guys are. I've read that you guys are. It's an IP intelligence company. It's probably much broader than that. But tell a little bit, just folks of like what Digital Envoy does, and then we'll talk about some of your product architecture and what that looks like.
I mean, Digital Envoy is a most unique and interesting company. So I've been here about 7 years.
No bias.
No bias at all. It's interesting because the company started in the 90s when the .com bubble was happening.
Oh, yes.
And publishers just needed to figure out how to monetize. And we were there. I wasn't here, obviously, then, but the original founders basically said, hey, look, there's a way we can take IP address, which is publicly available information, and take that information that's out there that says that, hey, these IP addresses are part of the US, these are for part of this country. So it's very country level, simple like that. And they said, well, we can help the publishers monetize their websites by at least telling the advertisers where people are coming from. That was the basic concept. IP addresses were never meant to be in ad tech. We were the culprits for making something like that happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we started out, the company started like that.
And definitely a big need. I mean, IP addresses are largely considered somewhat unreliable for marketing purposes because of kind of the lack of intel of like Rio, my colleagues in Denver, but when he's in New York, his IP address might still read Denver. And so any sort of location, geo-specific targeting or advertising, or even content delivery that might be location specific, is off because he's in a different place or he's in a different time zone or across the world. So oftentimes, and they're not considered to be persistent IPs, right?
That's correct. You've done your homework.
Yeah. Well, I've been in the identity space. And I went from New Star to TransUnion.
Okay.
We had rapidly moved into sort of the CTV television ecosystem, and IP addresses were one of those identity metrics, identity tokens, whatever you want to call it, pieces that were helping to drive sort of some of the programmatic spend and programmatic targeting in the CTV ecosystem.
Yeah.
But the big argument was, well, cookie deprecation, and yet a lot of the vendors that were powering programmatic and CTV saying, well, we have IP address. And our argument was, well, IP address isn't any more persistent than necessarily a cookie. It can be largely inaccurate based on the example that I gave before. So point being is that you guys are helping to fix.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of misconceptions of that. And I think you're familiar with that too, where people think that IP addresses are stable. And we've seen that over time, and we've been educating in this space. And the reason why we even came up to this and figured this out is a few years ago. And by the way, there's a lot more support. It's not just ad tech. We're supporting gaming and gambling, streaming media, cybersecurity, threat intelligence. So all our clients have different needs, even though it's the same exact identifier that goes across the board. Right?
Yeah.
And somebody basically came to us and said, hey, we want to understand the metadata around the IP addresses. This is for fraud detection capability.
Yeah.
How many devices are connected to it, et cetera.
Yeah.
Part of that metadata will be
give us context around a specific IP address.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not just the geo, but tell me also, did the IP address move? And how much did it move? Did it move from just Georgia to New York, or did it move from Georgia to Ukraine?
Right? Yeah. And what device types, matching to device type, et cetera.
Yeah. So, and they had some information about device type.
Yeah.
So IP address is such a connecting point. A lot of times people have something that they have and they're connecting it back to it.
Yeah.
So when we went down that path, what we recognized is that we can actually start measuring how much they're moving. And what we found is that on average in the US, for example, if you look at any particular geography, 20% of the IP addresses from week to week will move.
Yeah.
Which 20%? Nobody knows.
Yeah.
So,
and that's in the US, or is that global? Is that
so each country is slightly different because of the different ISPs, because the ISPs in the end are the ones who
internet service providers for those that don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's a Comcast, Charters, the Vodafones, all those guys, right? So they own it.
They control
my attention. Yeah, they have no interest in this side of the world or anything else, right? So when they move, they're just getting reassigned because I turn my, there's a power outage or something.
Yeah.
Now that address becomes available again. So what we found that in the US, week to week is 20%. UK is about the same, 22%. Germany is a little bit higher.
Yeah.
Or volatility there. But you take that to a 4-week period, and what we found is that becomes even more of a problem and becomes a 40 to 50% now, or have changed.
Wow.
So from an ad tech perspective,
lack of persistence, that's for sure, right? Your email address doesn't change at that rate, right?
Exactly.
You might have multiple email addresses, which is just a mapping exercise of like how many email addresses just fit this. Yeah. Can you map an IP address back to the device level and then back to the individual as a result, and then the individual is associated with the household? And how far does that chain go back in terms of understanding? And I know you had a conversation with Sarah Robertson from Experian, Chief Product Officer. You guys were probably geeking out and Chief Product Officer around all of this data. But do you guys have to partner in order to start connecting the dots of this sort of identity link?
Yeah, so I think what the leading identity graph companies, what we're seeing from them is that they understand the challenge that when you're connecting the IP address is used massively, as you know, between identities themselves. Right?
Yeah.
So connecting a hem to a may or a may to a cookie or whatever.
Yeah.
A lot of times IP address is the rail because it's a network layer. It's not a software layer. So it's always present.
Yeah.
The challenge with that is it's a time and location challenge.
Yeah. That's a dependency, right?
Yeah.
That's part of
Yeah.
it.
So when the identity graph companies that are ahead of the curve right now, what they're doing right now is recognizing that their digital identifiers have a drift problem potential.
Yeah.
And that drift problem starts because of the IP address is moving.
Wow. Yeah.
So if this moves and I'm connecting two different identities, then I'm actually not connecting anything.
So you guys are providing a level of temporal intelligence?
Exactly. So
right.
One of these
is spatial or geo intelligence.
The way we look at it is we're IP address company, but really a location company.
Yeah.
And we're saying, hey, all of these identities that are digital should be anchored in something. And why not location, right?
Yeah.
You can anchor in any other stable identifier, but in the end, IP addresses weren't meant to be the, it's a means to an end. It wasn't the person, the IP address. It's always been a means to end. But what we're really trying to do from an ad tech perspective is reach the people, and the means was the IP address. So we're basically flipping it around.
Yeah, and to filter out those people that have an IP address that doesn't match the location, right? Like the example of, Rio and Denver, now in New York, right? There's some sort of local advertisement you want to show him.
Yeah.
You don't show him a Denver ad in New York. Or
Exactly.
a New York ad in Denver. So are you enabling that sort of like, hey, whether it's a suppression of certain IPs that aren't relevant to that particular location, if you're doing a location-based.
So what we've actually done is we've kind of flipped it around. We said, and this is my,
tell me exactly that once. If my question was meandering around the answer here.
No, it's good. I mean, you have knowledge about the space, so. but I think the challenge here is that I came into this as an outsider, not from tech, and this is a problem. If that's what they're trying to solve for, why don't we focus on the buildings, right? So what we basically said is we're creating a new product here. That's why you're here. Is let's identify the building and create an ID for the building, because the people are associated with the building, and that's not likely to change.
Yeah, and the building could be an office building, it could be a house.
We're agnostic in that way.
Yeah,
we're basically if there's a Wi-Fi. Exactly. So if there's a Wi-Fi IP address there, we can reach people in that building.
Yeah,
and the range of the Wi-Fi IP address is about 30 feet. Yeah. So now your location constant is really good. Now the building's ID becomes the ID to reach, and then IP address become time series against it.
Yeah.
So if you're building a audience segment that
that's interesting.
Just
the building ID is not changing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's permanent.
Yeah.
It never changes. The IP addresses are now time series. So now you can actually go back in time and say, hey, this particular time that IP address showed up.
Yeah.
Where was that? Okay, here's a building in Denver. This other time, I got this IP address and this timestamp.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? It was actually the same building.
Yeah.
There's no way you would know that today without that kind of
very smart
system.
Yeah. You had to match to some sort of person ID, and the building ID was that solution, right? And then everything else has this temporal layer where it's like, yay or nay based on, or what are the trends happening across time.
Yeah.
And so you're saying, so let's back to use cases. So it sounds like there's a lot of use cases. I mean, I could see
there are
surveillance use cases. I could see CIA.
So we
FBI. You're not calling it.
We're only keeping this for ad tech only.
Yeah.
Not.
Oh, it's only.
We're not. Yeah.
But you mentioned fraud though.
So there's a couple of different applications for this, but we just launched this product last year.
Okay.
Product, and I think there's applications for this in other areas. But as a company, we made a decision for now. Let's focus on ad tech. But there's so many use cases in ad tech.
Got it.
Because
and how old is this company?
So the company started in the 1990s. Yeah. 28 years old now.
Yeah. Okay. And ad tech is the release of this particular product, but as a company, you guys offer, and Newstar was pretty simple. I think Newstar went over to the TransUnion acquisition. Speaking of identity graphs, along with Epsilon and Experian and the rest. And we have a call center solutions space where you need to be able to identify, is this a spoofed call? Is this a real call? If you're like a bank customer service agency, customer service rep, for example, fraud detection for fraud prevention, right? And that could be again spoofing, identity theft, things like that to prevent that especially for highly regulated industries, right?
Yeah.
So it was basically the same identity spine that was powering these different core capabilities. Then you identify, is this the person they say they are associated with this particular house? And then I was on the market solution side of the business. But so does Digital Envoy as a whole support? Is it a similar type of approach?
So I think Digital Envoy, the interesting thing about this is as commerce on the internet grew, Digital Envoy grew with it. Yeah, we've always had a nice tailwind of, there's e-commerce, there's social media, now omnichannel. I want to target the same people on a mobile device and on the desktop. Then came CTV. Now on targets, well, guess what? All of those devices have the same exact IP address. Yeah. So, and then gaming and gambling came about and more threat intelligence and cyber attackers. So we have grown with it in a very nice way. Yeah. And, when I first
with
came
the
here,
same core under
exactly.
And it all goes back to the building ID and then the time.
So it goes back to the IP addresses and geolocations.
Yeah.
We support a lot of companies here, a lot of the big DSPs, SSPs, audience companies. They all use a simple, where's this IP address coming from? Here's my geo response. That's been our core product since the 1990s. Yeah. All we've done is make that more and more accurate over time. Yeah. We're using the mobile device data. So we have we're vertically integrated. We have an SDK in mobile devices. So we have about 1 billion devices globally that have our partner SDKs. Yeah, and so that's an OEM relationship. Yeah, effectively. Manufacturers of the phones. No, it's actually app relationships. Oh, it's app relationships. Sorry. Yeah. So we're actually working with the apps. Usually they're climate or weather or transportation related. So usually there's a good location use case. Yeah.
So if you get one of those requests that says ask app not to follow or app follow only while using the app. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
That'd be a foregrounding use case.
Yeah.
So foregrounding is when you're actually using the app, then you can get that. But the nice thing about that is we have all these layers of way, as Neustar did, and does. Getting the data about what's a publicly available IP address, where is that? Country, region, city, postal code level. Yeah. What the device level data does is it gets you honed into very precise locations. But not where it's privacy intrusive. Yeah. Because an IP address of a Starbucks supports everybody who visits that Starbucks. Yeah. It's not associated to you or the next person that went in. Yeah. So
And then, so have you been rolling this out? Well, describe some of the use cases, right? For a specific, is it often like location specific type advertising? From a brand investment perspective, you think of the Starbucks, you think of the chains that have multiple locations and offerings that might be rolling out in some sort of cadenced way in certain markets, maybe not in other markets. And so it allows for a certain level of location specificity in their advertising.
Yeah. And when we first started out, we see use cases in measurement, in attribution being like, hey, I saw an ad on TV and then I went back and bought something on my desktop. The time between seeing it in TV and going to the desktop, maybe a few days, 2-3 days, because you saw it enough times. Yeah. Well, if the IP address change in the meantime, there's a challenge with that. So location ID, the way we're solving this right now is like, well, that IP address at the CTV when the ad was shown and the IP address of the website where that purchase happened may have changed. Well, but it's the same building. So time is backup. That's a use case.
Yeah. And what about out of home? Can you connect out of home to kind of location specificity? They just put up a big billboard, electronic or digital, JCDecaux or otherwise, right? And we want to track, we know traffic patterns for whatever it might be, foot traffic or car traffic. We want to track that back to all of the actions taken.
Absolutely. I think it's in an aggregated form, right? Yeah. So, out of home is going to be in a building like JCDecaux, billboard, meeting billboard or something. In that building, if people have visited and then they're leaving and going back, well, we have a lock ID or a location understanding of that. So you can have kind of an exposure rate of understanding people have been there. And then seeing within 30 miles, if that's the goal of who all are purchasing or doing some action based on that. And so you can measure it just within 30 miles of that particular location, if that 30 miles was in range, and understand what was the baseline before a purchase of that product, and did it change because of that particular ad, or if that was the campaign. So there's some. So we've also talked with agencies who really want to understand the challenges that being able to measure when it's out of geo in a local campaigns. That's another use case. Yeah, and being able to know for sure even when the IP address changes, because IP address can change, and now it may look like the campaign went out of market in the same time period as a forward period. Yeah. Because when they started doing the ads in that for a local campaign where precision is really important, right? You're trying to do it for small markets, but that's important to make sure that you're hitting the right postal codes. Well, if the IP address moves far away, so Comcast is a national ISP, internet service provider, they can move their IP addresses anywhere within the country. They don't have to keep it in the market. A small ISP that may be just for New York will usually just keep all their IPs there. So a Comcast advertisement or Comcast subscriber on the ISP side sees the ad, that IP can move anywhere from New York to Denver easily.
Yeah.
So now the ad looks like ad may go with it actually.
Yeah.
Right? Or so is that really what's happening, or is it because did the platform readjust or not?
Yeah.
And say, hey, this is the new IP issue. Right?
Yeah.
So this is another big challenge that I think is out there that now we can say, hey, the outcomes are better measurable if you know the data is actually clean.
Well, yeah, isn't that it's sort of like it's a context, just the new world, right? I mean, your data is your operating layer of our ecosystem, and the data has to be high fidelity and validated, right?
Yeah.
And matched to the context, right? This is a location based context, right? In order to know if this was like really an outcome drove. I think, like I look back at the early location based companies like the Verbs and the general, it kind of became a bad word in the industry, right? Did you know about these negative impressions, the negative connotations around location based marketing? One of it was some of the early players in the space, mobile like location analytics, were basically doing what cookie stuffing was, the cookie world, where you take credit for like everybody that walked into a specific Dunkin' Donuts simply because you had data attached to, like in one example, I don't know if it was Verb, but it was one of the locations. They had data on, basically the entire mobile ecosystem in the United States. It's like 300 million phones. And so they would over credit themselves for foot traffic into individual store locations because every device they could basically say, well, whereas there might have been consumer propensity for that person might not, needed to be advertised to go Dunkin' Donuts, right? Yeah. And so they would claim credit for people that were ordinarily just going during the commute into Dunkin' Donuts to say ROAS, right? When in fact they were just tracking the mobile devices. Those mobile devices weren't necessarily driving the outcome or the ads on mobile devices. Yeah. Right.
I am not familiar with this story, but I've been in ad tech for about 7 years. I think I need another 20 to understand.
Yeah. It's sort of very complicated. It's sort of almost like a mobile ID stuff where you start to claim, like if you've got a cookie on this entire addressable audience, right? And I did this for like the New Jersey Devils. We were doing like ticket sales. We did the New Jersey Devils. If you've got an IP address associated with basically your entire addressable market, not an IP address, the cookie, you could almost claim, just because you're able to serve them an impression or right. Even though your action of delivering a display ad through programmatic may not really be the driver, right? And so I think that's where the measurement use cases come into play because you start to understand mortality. You start to understand like it sounds like you guys are solving some of the location problems.
Yeah, and I think that is better understood now. Because the conversations we're having is starting with the identity graphs themselves and saying, hey, look, I need to solve the infrastructure of advertising, which is underneath layers identity itself.
Yeah.
So ID graphs everybody's building their own ID graphs right now, right? And they have what first party data? Yeah. What first party data do they have? That's the leverage point that they have, and then they can build on top of that. But the challenge is they're all using IP addresses to connect the dots potentially. So the ones who are trying to fix that problem are basically saying, okay, now I need to cleanse this so that everything above in that, what happens after that is going to be cleaner and better. Yeah, I think that you guys have had the TruthSec folks here also.
Yep.
And they've kind of showed the problem.
TruthSec for Scott McKinley.
Yeah,
we had Scott McKinley on the pod. Yeah, and he talked about, his whole thesis is that the underlying data, it's sort of that data context layer has been largely dirty and polluted in the ecosystem, right? And people have been talking identity and identity graphs for years, but there's just more fidelity, more validation that's still needed. Yeah. And it sounds like you guys are
and that's what we're seeing
for the location side, so that it's not just kind of like bullshit location data, we'll say, right? Yeah. It actually is validated and there's a scientific approach to things like that.
Exactly.
And that's like that.
Yeah. And we're saying, hey, look, take the building approach from building or postal code, and it's a set ID that's stable, it doesn't, it's not competing because it's kind of an infrastructure layer, right?
Yeah.
All of these things connect to it. So there's a device ID, there's a person ID, and then there's a household ID, and then there's an infrastructure layer ID. So we're kind of like, all of these things actually can be aligned.
Yeah.
If you just use it the right way. And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. And speed becomes the advantage that AI brings to people, is that aligning and matching and eliminating the noise from that's those 4 different signal types.
Yep.
Right. Is what AI can bring more quickly to bear.
Yeah.
Right. Versus your data analytics or data science. Right.
Yeah. And I think some people
Not
who are
for some-
seeing that
yeah.
are starting to get ahead of it because they're basically understanding the fact that if the data is poor and you use automation like AI later down the road when that's coming, well, what's going to happen? There's going to be massive drifts and
You're gonna-
no control.
Yeah. You're going to amplify shit. I mean, that's kind of the problem.
Where do you fix the problem?
Yeah. And then you blame the AI when it's in fact
Exactly.
it's that data operating system. Really, it's not the oil. It's actually it's the tech is entirely reliant. It's the car.
Yeah.
The data is now the car. It's not the, like, so if you ever hear anybody say data is the new oil, just throw them in the ocean, right? Because that is just an outrageously outdated statement. Yeah. Right?
I heard that about 10 years ago.
Yeah. Scott Brinker was like, no, it's like composability depends on, which is how all tech is moving, depends on this data operating layer, and everything is moving, whether it's AI or it's composable software. It's all moving towards that type of model.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And we need clean, good data providers. So it sounds like you guys are doing your
and we're trying to help our part with it.
Yeah.
Okay, how can you actually cleanse your own data?
Yeah.
Use the infrastructure layer identity like this, like with an IP address. We fix the volatility problem. You fix your identity problem. Once the volatility problem is fixed, and now we at least have something that everybody can trust that can be used for targeting, that can be used for measurement, and be able to target it back in. Say, okay, yep, that really was a Denver campaign, and was
the exhaustive feedback loop, right? From measurement. That's awesome. Well, hey, thanks for joining. Sorry to make this so quick. We can certainly have longer conversations going forward. These are kind of our power sessions. So if it was like rapid fire, I apologize. But
it was great.
This is a great show. And it was great to get to know you and to really dig into your brain of how you've thought about this architecture. We've got a lot more episodes coming. Day 4 at Cannes Lions in the Hearst House. And thanks again for joining.
Thank you for having me.
And we've got Shina. I'm gonna get this right. Shina Zuffer. God,
it's like suffer.
We just went over it, but I'm gonna just keep trying until I get it right.
No, I appreciate you trying.
Yeah,
it's not the intention.
And you are the first. I mean, I don't know if I can just use this categoriization, but the first influencer or creator.
So I don't know. I
right.
I am public on Instagram. I did make a video recently, which I rarely ever do on my Instagram, and I usually do it on my TikTok, talking about my disdain for prediction markets.
Okay.
Because I realized a lot of young people were unaware about some of the, well, not some, many of the
poly market, in other words.
Yes, poly market, Kalshi, not my truth.
So are you saying that's as far as you go into the influencer category?
When I think I have something that needs to be said, 100%. But I am public, so I guess that makes me a creator.
Yeah. And co-founder
and
CMO, Juve Consulting.
Of Juve Consulting,
and you guys have been so there's a parent company?
No, well, I feel like I've never thought about it that way because we were a small shop, but ran the largest, most popular Gen Z marketing agency for the past 8-9 years, and we got acquired by United Talent Agency 2 years ago. 2.5 years.
There was an acquisition. So I was trying to give it was United Talent Agency.
Yes,
that was what was on top of it. It's been a busy day, so I apologize for the blanks. But great, welcome to the pod. And so tell us, like, what does Juve Consulting do? Like, what are your core deliverables from an agency perspective for United Talent to clients, and where do you fit into that?
Yeah, now that Juve is known as UTA Next Gen, we focus a lot on understanding how brands can show up in culture across cultural moments, across creator, community, and that's for Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits, startups, political campaigns, to help them understand next generation audiences. So I think before, obviously, there's a lot of discourse on Gen Z and what are the differences between millennials. Now there's Gen Alpha, there's Gen Beta after 2025.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a pseudoscience when it comes to generations.
I would not want to be a Gen Beta. just sounds bad.
No,
just to be clear.
Gen Z's kids could, very much so. Well, they are going to be Gen Beta if you're having kids now.
No dude
Yeah.
wants to be a beta, right? I mean,
all about alpha male. Well, I think maybe, and perhaps we need to interrogate that a little further too. What is alpha and beta? We're just repeating the alphabet, so it's like Gen Z now, alpha, beta, gamma.
Well, we met at the Hearst dinner. Remember that?
Yeah,
If possible, that was so much
incredible
fun.
dinner,
Yeah.
very fun. Lots of conversation, lots of hot takes, lukewarm takes, all of it.
I remember we were going around the table, and then everyone, there's some pretty interesting comments, and then like you spoke as she sounds super cool. I want to hear more about this. I'm so glad you could come here. And then
I felt the same way. I literally went up to Rio and I said, "You said some really astute, interesting points."
True story. She came around here. She's like, "That was fun." So. One thing I'd love to dig into a little bit is we've touched on it a bit here at Cannes this year about kind of how valuable in real life, real experiences, like the trust people have of people over institutions, over political parties, over, I mean, just like there's something there. I'd love your thoughts on that.
We talk a lot about how for young people, there's this innate skepticism that's come about that the institutions that were historically meant to empower you have actively disempowered you, whether we're talking about policy or government or brands, and how the role of institutions, I think, has really evolved. But there's a responsibility that we put on individuals even more than we put it on institutions. Like, what does accountability and trust really look like? That for Gen Z, for example, there's a lot of moral inconsistencies that we claim to care about sustainability, but at the same time we buy from fast fashion. And the reality is that we want things that are convenient. We're so price conscious. We're a cash strapped generation. So
yeah, but is that a generational thing? I mean, aren't there moral inconsistencies across every generation, across like the history of time?
Absolutely, but I think there's stereotypes and discourse that says Gen Z is lazy or Gen Z is entitled. And and my answer,
don't typecast us.
And don't typecast, I think, any generation, because every generation, has pushed the status quo.
They said it about us. They said Gen X, other slackers, and maybe the 90s we were, but most Gen Xers I know got their shit together, right?
Yeah, 100%.
There was a movie called Slackers, right?
Good movie. And they said that,
I've not seen the movie.
It is good. Yeah,
it's just like we don't do anything. Right?
No, it's
true. I think to your point of that age, time, and like figuring things out. But I think like Gen Zers want like the option to have both. If we're going to talk about the workplace, like we want to work from home, but we also want to be in person because it's intentional. Like there's a meeting and we want you to understand having a relationship with your boss and the other leaders on your team and your peer group. Young people want to find love by the water cooler.
There we go.
We're a generation, and you get to meet people at work, and no one wants to be on the apps and stuck on their phone in that capacity. So I think there's these lines that we toe, but instead of talking extremes and generalizations, I think there's a sentiment to how we're choosing to react to the world around us.
Yeah.
The world is incredibly overwhelming. We have access to information unlike ever before.
Like any generation in the history of humanity.
Any other, exactly.
Right? In terms of information access and flow.
Yeah,
right?
and social and digital has really changed the way that we view our proximity to the world. So I would say every generation has pushed the status quo, but because of social media and technology, we can galvanize unlike ever before, for better or
Rio,
worse.
we just need to get out of the way and just let the tsunami,
I don't know if that's
this tidal wave. We're the old guard of it. Gen X seems old now, and I remember when we were sort of, it was the baby boomer, which got labeled the boomers, right?
Well, they're still there.
Yeah, we were like, enough of the, Vietnam and the love generation in 1969. But it sounds like a lot of the themes that you were focusing on as agency really focus on authenticity. So brand authenticity delivered to younger audiences because they're often in trust. Right? Because oftentimes brands, there's a sense of mistrust, whether it's mistrust in like an LLM, like AI is a general category, or mistrust in a brand because people feel maybe they're being manipulated, right? So do you think that that's a part of what you're counseling brands to think about is how do you appear authentically in a trustworthy way?
I think authenticity and trust has become trite buzzwords that we overuse in the world of marketing and advertising. And to me, the shift is like, how do we talk about transparency? Like if you are a brand, can you tell us what do you stand for? What is your why? And then how do you tell that internally to your team? And then into the real world, can your consumers understand what you stand for? You don't have to talk about every issue. You don't have to show up at every moment, but when it makes sense and you have a specific vantage point or a point of view or a perspective or a story that you want to share, there's incredible pre-existing platforms that you can integrate into. Like, how do we not interrupt the consumer experience, but instead really integrate the stories that we want to tell in a meaningful way? So I absolutely agree with you that yes, trust is important and relevant. Authenticity is relevant. At UTA, we just launched this culture canon. That's a two-part platform. One that's a cultural calendar about where should brands be showing up across the cultural ecosystem, sports, gaming, entertainment. And then with that, a culture index that takes a lot of data and signals around how people are reacting to brand sentiment, which is incredible and so exciting that we have this now platform and tool to do these things. But I think context really matters. So if the data is
Yeah.
telling you something, that doesn't mean anything if you can't translate that. And I view our
Yeah,
role
context is a huge category,
100%.
both for data strategy, for AI strategy, for advertising strategy. It's where are you appearing and how, right? Really translates to some level of engagement or
Absolutely. And
yeah.
I think that's our role as people, as marketers, and strategists, is to like do that translation work.
Funny, like the cultural kind of thing. And maybe think of Brett. Remember we had a couple episodes we talked about like reverse that, which we call the AI slop canon, right? Where it's like
Yes,
AI plus
definitely
bad
happening.
judgment ends up like a deluge of bad content. But AI can be used to like tailor content and create lots of other stuff. So like this whole trend of like experiences, I'm imagining for your generation. I mean, like when we were not digital natives, right? Like we grew up like we drank from freaking garden hoses, right? We we rode bikes around all night, and then the computers came, the internet came, and we adopted it. And I think millennials kind of still were kind of not natives either. Like the beginning of their lives, they didn't have like, and then it really started. But I think for your generation, you grew up in this completely native in this world that we're all in now. And I like what you said before about how like, oh, this generation, they don't get it. They're lazy. This. I think that's so unfair, right? You've had a different experience. And I can't even imagine growing up with that and then dealing with a pandemic.
Yeah,
Like
100%.
that must have, like what that must have done, like not being able to like, at an age where you probably just wanted to be out with your friends, right? That must have been a very formative experience. Do you think all of that has anything to do with like this return to in real life, this experience thing? Because it seems like it's a real thing. And I mean, I think I kind of get it. Does that make sense?
People are a product of their circumstances. So I think for Gen Z, we've a generation that's been marked by 9/11, seeing our parents go through the financial crisis in 2008 to then COVID-19 most recently. And I was in college during COVID. So my senior year was fully remote, but I still had a great time in the sense that a lot of people still came back to campus. I had a car on campus. I lived off campus in an apartment with 5 girls in a townhouse. So it was very nice we lived in West Philly. I went to school at UPenn in Philly, but most people don't even venture off campus. So it was nice to then be like, okay, like you don't go past 38th Street. We were on like 44th and Sansom next to like the best cheesesteak place in Philly. So it was really nice to get to see different parts of the city and to explore. But I think I'm the first in my family to go to college and I really wanted to walk. So not getting to walk at graduation was like the thing that I like. I was like, maybe I gotta go to grad school. And I was like, no, I don't know if I'm gonna be doing all that. But it was absolutely a moment where I think I had to reimagine what it looked like. But if I was a freshman, I think I would have felt that even more intensely. And a lot of people find their community through clubs, through social convenings, through just the serendipity of running into being on campus. And I think for me, the biggest takeaway during COVID was I missed acquaintances. Like the people that you like run into on Locust on campus and you say like, we have to get a coffee and you never get a coffee, but you just saw each other and that was really meaningful. We don't get to like celebrate the local or like know people in that capacity anymore as the world's become more globalized.
Yeah, in real life has become kind of a buzzword. Speaking of trite buzzwords, it's certainly been a common talking point that I've heard over the last like year. But I want you to define for me the cultural ecosystem because one, this does sound very US centric. Very US. It's not. This is not a worldview because the cultural context in my wife is Japanese, for example. Our cultural ecosystem, she understands it. She sees it. She knows the rules of engagement around it, but she doesn't relate to it as deeply as someone that was born and raised here. So how do you guys define the cultural ecosystem, and then how does that expand outside the narrow focus of the U.S. Right?
I think there's some universality in terms of like emotional sentiment and like what are the universal things that we all believe in. The United States is an incredibly individualistic society compared to the rest of the world, right? That's a lot more collectivist. But when we talk about in-person or community first mindset or creators or how if you're a brand and you want to understand how people are reacting to your campaign, you look at the comment section. It's still rooted in a very collectivist Eastern concept of sorts. That's like the immigrant mentality of like, you've got to look out, you feed yourself before you feed others before you feed yourself, right?
Well, wait
But
a
I
minute. You're
think-
saying the comments section reflects a collectivist, let's say a
And yeah, because-
Confucian. Right. I thought that every
100%.
comment section eventually ends
Because
up
look at
with
how-
somebody calling somebody else a Nazi. Isn't that the path of like a comment section? Right?
That's every
But-
Reddit thread.
But 100%, there's absolutely things that are divisive. I would not disagree with that, but I think you can see the top liked comment is absolutely a collectivist notion because it has 10,000 likes. You're getting to see in real time how people are reacting
that
to
is
things.
technically collectivism
Yeah.
in terms of how people are responding to it,
100%.
engaging.
But I think that we in the West have to be cognizant of the fact that we are not the center of the universe, right? And I think that brands have a real opportunity to also reimagine how do we show up in communities where no one is telling their stories, like the most marginalized communities or the people, and even within America, right? In rural America, people who are afraid of what AI is going to do. People have no concept of like the average American has $500 in their savings account. That should be terrifying to us because then when we see things like Kalshi or Polymarket or other folks that are going to be infringing on our economic freedom, it's going to those that are most marginalized first, not those with privilege. So I think, to me, when I think about brands or culture, it's like, how do we shift the conversation to say, what are people talking about at the dinner table? Whether it's your group chat with your friends, because that's how you choose to talk about what's hot and relevant and what's happening in your community, whether it's like parents who are like at the dinner table, there's no phones. We're just going to have a real conversation about how your actual day was. I think the modern day dinner table has become in digital online spaces, which is a form of community. But at the same time, it's also happening in the real world.
Yeah. It's interesting. My daughter's 13 and I watch the way she interacts with her friends, right? That like they'll all be on, she'll have like 15 group texts with all different groups of friends and she'll somehow like manage everyone. She says, oh, this
Absolutely,
one's
yeah.
these people, this people. And so like,
Yeah.
she'll keep track of them all. And like, that's how like
They've
the
all got
news,
their own name. They've got a distinctive picture.
but then like
all of it.
the news is out instantly, like one little thing and everyone knows it. It's just, it's super wild. It's like, Abby, how do you keep track of all this? And she's like, oh, but they grew up with
Second
it, right?
nature, yeah.
It's second nature. It's really interesting. And I like the comment too about how like the different cultures. I actually think going back to Cannes, one thing I think is so cool about this is, look, you get on a plane, it's full of Americans coming over here, right? And it's like, everyone's like, why are you going to the south of France hanging with a bunch of Americans? I mean, number one, it's not only Americans, right?
Yes,
There's a lot of Europeans I met with here who like
folks from South Asia, everywhere.
Yes,
Yeah, it's
people
a
all over
global
the world,
community. 100%.
totally. And like, it's an opportunity for us all to get together, spend time together in real life in a place that, at least for me, it's 8 hours from my time zone. So my phone's not blowing up until like 4, right? To be able to like, and this year we had a lot of these podcast sessions, but some of my best meetings, I mean, you said this earlier, Brett, were just random, just in person.
Yeah.
Like, I've wanted to see you.
Absolutely.
Holy crap. I can't like, let's hang. Let's meet back in New York next time. So like, there's been a lot of that. So I think there is something special about this event and why it continues to grow and just, and have relevance.
Yeah,
Makes
you'll
sense.
see people in New York and LA that you're literally living next to, but you won't meet them until you run into them at the Croisette. So there's something very, very special about that.
So I'm seeing a
Same.
trend focus back to the kind of cultural context or the cultural ecosystem here, right? We talked about sort of global versions of this versus kind of US centric versions. We talked about collectivism, right? It sounds like there's a big move to push not only our institutions, but our brands towards away from kind of a monocultural view of the world. And monocultural can be divided. It's not just white Americans of an age of this, right? But it could be socioeconomic monoculturalism, right? It could, which again, disenfranchised that don't have, let's say, the money to buy this or that or the other thing, right? They live in communities that don't have the same resources, right? So is it sort of a call for brands to really think it's not just a multicultural thing? It's a socioeconomic thing. There's so many different dimensions. I hate to say the word intersectionality, but this kind of seems to me in that realm of like, you've got this pie chart or this massive
postmodernist.
Yeah. You've got the circular chart that's super multidimensional and it gets very complex and it gets very complex for, let's say, old legacy brands to be able to navigate the variations. How do you counsel and help brands figure out what's going to resonate across all of these different dynamics? And does AI come into play? Because we've got a lot of data access, a lot of nuanced data that can be versioned and applied in the right way to the right people, at the right time, the right place, all that sort of stuff. How do you guys think about that and counsel it? Because it is a complex ecosystem.
I think my hot take is just that like we've chosen to complicate it when we don't need to. That like in reality, like niche is the new mainstream. Communities know where they want to show up and how they want to show up. It's our onus to say, like, what is our ownership in that conversation, and do we even have a place to have a say? Like, not every opinion should be valued equally is what I would say to that. And
in context. Yeah, in that specific context. It reminds me kind of, it's weird, I'm going to make a connection here. The pharmaceutical conversations that we had with some senior executive pharmaceutical folks. And they talked about a lot of it's like hyper niche, personalized advertising to a super small subsegment that has this condition that maybe only 5 million people in the entire country have.
Especially with these orphan
drugs,
right?
And you know, they're very expensive, so it's worth spending the money to hit that audience. But there was this hyper personalization process to reach these people and talk to them empathetically about what they're going through. And it sounds like it's the same kind of logic applied to, like, speak to me where I am in the context I'm in. And in context can be the media environment. It could be the way that you communicate, right? All of these things. Which
I think a lot of people think that, like, Gen Z really cares about data protection and data privacy. The reality is, like, we're not educated enough to care. Like, you don't know what cookies are when you are signing up for a website, or you don't know how Google ad search or AdWords works. And the caveat to that, though, is that the reason why data does matter is that it's exactly what you said. It's personalization. That if I'm giving my data to get a better quality or service for a product or whatever I'm searching for, like, that is what Gen Zers are optimizing for. It's why, like, Spotify Wrapped is so beloved. You gave all your data for the year. You can now see what was the top song you listened to this week. You can now
such
see, like,
a better service with that, 100%.
Yeah.
Funny, I had this conversation with my mother, who's definitely a baby boomer, right? Or an older baby boomer too. So I remember she had an Android phone, and she was not logged into Google Maps, right? And so she said, "Oh, I'm trying to remember this restaurant I went to." And I said, "Well, we shouldn't be there. If you search, it's going to come up. It'll remember you went there." She's like, I realized she's not logged, she's not authenticated. I said, "Why aren't you logging?"
Google.
Right. And I said, "Why are you not authenticated?" She's like, "I don't want Google to have my information." If you have an Android phone, they literally know when you're in the toilet. I'm not kidding, right? Like, I'm not saying they're listening to you, but like, Google has a model on every American. Like, they know everything. Like, you'd be horrified if you're scared of this, you'd be horrified to know what they have. And I said, "Listen, they already know about you. Let's log in, and you can favorite it. You can know where you want to go. It'll make your, like, it's going to be a better experience for you." She did that. She said, "Thank you for doing that for me." So funny. So it's the value exchange. So China, I know that you are super busy and you probably have to run to your next meeting. And I saw you texted him earlier to tell them you're going to be late. So thank you for carving out some time for us.
Thank you so much for having me.
This was fun. I feel like we could go on and on. And I really enjoyed it, and enjoy the rest of the conference. And
stay cool, hopefully. Thank you so much for having me. And hopefully, you know, we all get to be in a place where we're leaving the world a little bit better than we found it, and able to have that context and nuance, and also to give people the benefit of the doubt whenever we can, in the comment section and in person.
As long as it isn't evolved into name calling.
Well, I don't. If people troll, I don't respond. I mean, you know, if it's a good comment, but every once in a while, like a Twitter something or LinkedIn, someone will troll.
They're gonna rage bait you.
I get another common theme here. I'm sensing that there is a move towards a sense of collectivism, right? And I almost think that the Yahoo individualistic, like Ayn Rand capitalists, like, part of frontiersman that is the American, right? I mean, it's the part of me is kind of proud of that because it drives innovation. It drives things that you might not see out of more collectivist societies, where there's an expression in Japan. My wife is Japanese national, that the nail that sticks up in Japanese, the nail that sticks up gets nailed back down, right? The wave that rises rejoins the ocean, right? And so, but part of that's just more social, awareness and social rules of engagement, right? So that you can have your individualistic conversations and perspectives and feelings on the side behind closed doors. But when you're with other people, there are taboos. Erez Levitt, excuse me, one of our close friends, talks a lot about this, about things that like
making bad behavior.
Speaking of the comment doom, like those people should be, in a sense, that go down that path.
Sense of shame, responsibility.
Yes, so held socially responsible. And so in Japan, one thing that I've learned, and I think it's been bred into me after 26 years, is that despite my Yahoo and Ayn Rand kind of nature to myself, I'm like, forward, frontier. Despite that, You just have to be like, my wife hammers it on all the time, is like, you've got to be hyper aware of the impact you're having. And this is from me, loud Brett House here. But the impact you're having on other people,
100%.
and show an ungodly amount, a huge amount of respect for other people's space, their presence, their differences. And you can have your side conversations in the back room, but be respectful of that. Understand the context, right? And the context applies to everything. It applies to data strategy. It applies to media and advertising strategy. Context is king. And it sounds kind of trite, but it really is. It's like, because if you're out of context, you're irrelevant. Or you might be offensive in some
100%.
cases.
And I do think it's happening, to be fair, at least in New York, Nixon 5. We just had, some primary campaigns. Like, it's.
Are you in New York?
I'm in New York. So,
Wasn't that great?
So it was, and people became Knicks fans 2 days before the final. And they're like, I love the Knicks. I got the merch. I got the bootleg merch. Here I am. And I think there's something to be said about, like, what are the case studies and the people that we get to learn from and what gives us hope. And when I think about New York and, this era of, like, Mumdanistan that everyone's talking about, it's like, pothole politics worked, right? You got to see the mayor of New York go ahead and fill up 100,000 potholes in New York City. And you felt like you were part of that experience because you saw it online and social. You could go and literally watch him do the 100,000th pothole in person. You can see creators talk about it. You see legacy media interviews. Like, it's a whole integrative experience around the context of, like, New York City is the only city in the world. And that's, like, so special because I think it brings in something.
The New Yorker
It's the New Yorker
right?
cover. It's everything.
Actually,
it's
like,
full ecosystem.
just regardless of what you feel about his politics, he ran a brilliant campaign. He was out
It's the
there
best
every day.
brand case
He was
study.
out there
Yeah.
every single day, meeting with
100%.
people, talking to people. He walked the whole island. It was super impressive. And I think that is definitely a harbinger of what we're going to see be effective in the future in terms of type of campaign style, for sure.
100%. Brands can learn from it.
And his speech, I got to give him credit because, again, regardless of how you feel about his politics, you could be one way or the other. His Knicks speech, his Knicks victory speech, would have been
very good.
the best delivered politicians. Like, because it was all about bringing the city together, right? Like you realized, and what I said to because I'm a Red Sox fan, right? So I've got Boston family, but I've lived in New York for half my life, for 26 years. So now you know how old I am. But I'm like, the Knicks are, and I like literally wrote this to my brother. I was like, hashtag soul of the city. They are the 53 years. You wouldn't think. I've seen.
I'm 26, so in 1999 was the last time that they made it to the final, and I was like, "That's crazy to think about."
And Marcus Camby from UMass Amherst, where I was from, my alumni, brought us to the Final Four at UMass, and then stormed into New York City. And so I'm like, this is really cool.
I've been a Knicks fan since I moved to New York when I was 7 years old. So it's been a long. That was for me. It was a long time.
And it's so special to see that because people literally are so emotional, and like I feel emotional, but in a very different way.
And didn't people interact differently on the streets too?
100%.
Right? And like I was telling Rio, it's like he's a Yankees fan, so we've gone to Yankee Red Sox games more times than we can. I've seen the Yankees completely.
My wife used to work for the Yankees.
Yeah, and we went to a game. I traveled down from Boston to see Pedro Martinez pitch, one of the greatest pitchers of his generation, and they walloped him. It was like 13-2. The game was over in like the third inning.
Well, it's not Pedro in his he had a short line, but it was an incredible call, right?
Yeah.
Like for 2 or 3 years, he was maybe the best pitcher I'll ever see.
Wow.
He was like unhittable. Remember that?
Wow.
But then,
Yeah.
any of that, they destroyed him.
Yeah, and I was telling Rio that I've seen 4 Yankees championships,
Wow, that's
right? Like during my time, because I moved in during the 99, like 2000, that whole like back to back with Derek Jeter and all that sort of stuff. I saw that 13 inning game when Jeter jumped into the crowd and busted up his face, jumped into the third baseline. It was a 13 inning game. I was there for all 3 against the Red Sox. And I've seen 2 ticker tape parades for the Giants, even though I'm a Patriots fan. I've seen a ticker tape parade for the women's national team. So I've seen a lot of like champions in not only in the downtown, but in New York City. And I've never seen the energy that was in the entire city.
That tip in was a game 4.
Yeah.
It was a game, like when he.
OG, yeah.
Oh my God, it was insane.
I was in the hotel
I was like,
lobby.
give him a statue in New York City right now.
That
I was
was
like,
like-
throw that man a statue.
I mean, I was so energized. I couldn't
Yeah.
go to bed. But then also, like, every street, because I was in a hotel in Chelsea, every
Oh my God.
street was just cars gridlocked, people
Honking,
honking,
yeah.
dancing.
All
It was
of-
like, and like, yeah, I've been in New York a good portion of my life. I've never seen. The only thing I think is comparable to me was I lived in France when they won the 98 World Cup.
Okay.
And that was like, That was
I'm
even
sure
more
it was more. I was
bananas.
gonna say they probably went even harder than we
Yeah,
did.
I mean,
To
there
be
was
fair, and
people
that says
dancing on
something.
all the rooftops.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like people
Yeah,
climbing
yeah.
stuff. There was, but
But I think even like when there was a train station next to Penn Station that they made in the Knicks colors, and I was like, that's just a small detail.
Yeah.
That every time you walk past it, you're reminded that the game is happening. You want to take a picture next to it. You see the mayor walk out of it. You see everyday people walk in and out of that station and take pictures. But I think it's just a small thing. Like imagine if a brand just did that because they knew that this was like important to the community and it was localized in that way. That would be like so meaningful to so many people. But it's such a small thing that's
It's like
in the back of your
nuanced
head.
communication strategies, right? Multidimensionally nuanced communication strategies that really make all the difference. Yeah,
Absolutely.
this has been. And it sounds like you're not from New York originally, are you?
I was born in Brooklyn. I was
Born in Brooklyn. Oh, there you are.
I now live in Long Island, but I canvas. I do what I can. I look out.
Yeah,
for
went
my
to school in
community.
Philly, but you are a New Yorker.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, if you've just become a New Yorker
No,
through
no,
this sort of
no.
common experience.
I am an Eagles fan.
Oh my
It's,
gosh.
because of the Philly connection.
Yeah.
Love Jalen, but yeah, it's been a very fun time to see sports and and culture and community all come together in New York.
Yeah,
100%.
we've Rio and I have been there forever from 9/11, 3 blocks away. Not to go down that path, but we were
I was
three.
on Broad Street and Wall.
We were
my
2 blocks
God.
from one another, and we walked.
That's
He
insane.
walked.
I
He
can't even
got caught
imagine.
outside, and I walked home through these apocalyptic sort of like gray snow covering the entire
Yeah, the
downtown
I was
area.
covered in ash.
Yeah, single high heel shoe tipped on its side, and I just remember walking and the eerie quiet and the blackness on the other side. And I mean, I was in the building when all this stuff was happening. I was on AOL Instant
I
Message.
remember when the second tower, when the South Tower collapsed, I was standing at Battery Street Park, which is like Battery Park, which is just like maybe 3 blocks from there.
Yeah,
I remember it was so surreal. It's just like the top tipped, and so you don't realize how big these buildings are, and it just starts.
Oh my.
And then everyone's just watching in disbelief. And then when it collapsed, this big cloud came out, and everyone thought it was a fireball, right? So everyone starts running. They just boom, hits you. And it was just this cloud of dust. And then planes started flying overhead. The Air Force finally showed up like an hour and a half later. I mean, that was like, it was a New York moment. It's not a good one, but it was one that stays with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
and it was speaking of resilience, that was a moment that like I realized like I'm a New Yorker, and like my roots grew deeper. I'm not going to become a Yankees fan, but my roots grew really deep, and it's like one of those things where you're like resiliency. Am I gonna fight or am I gonna flee? And I'm like, I'm gonna fight. And I'm gonna stay here, and this is my home. Yeah. So, anyways, it's good to connect over this. I think it ties into kind of a larger theme of just connecting to people where they are. I think that's kind of what we're talking about in all of this. And it sounds like you're leading a very successful agency to help do that, and to realize like, hey, dummies, right? There's all this nuance. There's all this nuance to how you deliver messages, on where you deliver messages. And that's why Rio and I are really gaming for a consumer-based, like OpenClaw for the masses, a consumer-based agent that allows you to control how advertisers advertise to you, how media, it manages your day-to-day life. Like I think we're in a moment of, it needs to be democratized, and people need to have more control over their consumer experiences, their day-to-day life experiences. And it's becoming easier and faster.
Absolutely.
With
and
some of
ownership,
these,
and ownership, point, right? As these systems are being created, like how do we choose to be selective about who gets to be arbiters of these systems and gets the credit and then benefit from it?
I should have the right to turn off, the feed that I don't want to see, when I open up my phone every morning. Now, again, you have a choice with which media company to look at, which
or maybe we need a public option, like government-owned entity of sorts, but we're not necessarily trending towards that. There's going to be a massive consolidation across media, entertainment, and technology. So I think it really begs the question of like, what is the role of government there? What is the role of regulation?
This is civics.
All of it. Yeah.
This is civics. And there's forces in this country that are trying to destroy NPR, that are trying to destroy PBS. And you could say, hey, maybe it has swung. The pendulum is swung in one direction or the other, but that doesn't mean that the fundamental principle of civics and of common cultural elements, as opposed to like balkanized, like a world of just division.
I just did a dinner on new media, and I asked everyone, what's one piece of media that you're obsessed with? And 2 Gen Zers in the room quoted PBS documentaries and the PBS channel as like the content that they're obsessed with, and how like PBS had a program where like if you couldn't go to a Broadway show, they would record all of, I believe it was Broadway, like it's like a series that they did, and then you could go and watch it in like an archive situation. She was like, I loved watching that, and I was like, It's like that return to
That-
analog,
that-
return to nostalgia, simpler
Yeah.
times, whatever fantasization we might be doing. But I think there's a lot to be said about how we're choosing these media companies and systems to come about and who's owning them.
I also think too, like there's been this fragmentation, right? Which is both good and bad, right? I mean, there was like we lived through, like Brett, our lives was this period of mass media, right? Remember when
You watch the same channel at the same time, the same news.
when we got up, there was like 10 channels, right?
Yeah,
UHF, you'd have
absolutely.
a bunch of other options, which are pretty crappy, right? But like,
100%,
but that was it. So it was the era of mass media, which was not a normal thing. That was just a temporary. Like before that, every like Philly had like 30 newspapers in like the 1850s, something like that, right? So I think that, and we had this consolidation. Now I think because of new media, because of people getting their content, people will go to PBS and we need institutions like that to create great content, like there's documentaries, but also like people go to, we talked about this at the dinner, like they'll listen to a 3-hour podcast.
Yeah.
They'll spend time on the content, like watching the content they like, and they'll watch a lot of it. But they don't want to be like spoon fed, like they don't want to be, they don't want to be like told what to think.
Yeah. And I think we've talked about this maybe briefly, Rio, that like now the way that we think about creators commenting on news and culture is that you take a legacy print media headline and then you green screen it on TikTok and you give your subjective point of view. Like we're seeing the rise of first person narrative and opinions in that format, but there's still an important credit that we have to give to journalists, to people that are doing the hard work, that are not even compensated enough for all the.
We're keeping you. You realize we're going to keep you for a couple more minutes because we should have you on for like an hour because I want your perspective on.
I like to
I'm like you're awesome, man.
I like to yap. I like to talk very quickly.
Because I want your perspective because we hear this perspective all the time, and we have a lot of common threads running through all of our podcasts, and it's a lot of tech and data, but long form content. Right versus short form content, right? And we had a conversation. I keep mentioning this, but with Vanessa Otero, the CEO of Adfontes Media, and they track basically bias in journalism from like extreme right to extreme left, and it's because it's had a dramatic impact on investment in news journalism, right? Or in advertising against news journalism, which has affected the journalism industry, right? And suddenly you've got this collapse of like investigative journalism, which impacts democracy. It has all these downstream negative effects. And her argument basically is that you can advertise in a lot of places against this really good content safely. And we're going to prove it to you with math. And so that's what they do as a company. But we had this conversation about long form content versus short form content. Like it's almost a chicken the egg story around like TikTok and Reels and YouTube. Like, is it because people have a propensity to absorb short form content? I have a 19-year-old son. He sits there and does the doom scrolling, the TikTok. What do you do when you do the mind, when you just mind, brain rot. Brain rot. Sorry, Jesus, I'm old. Brain rot. Like we're and like he knows it. And he's like, my generation's been screwed like with social media, right? Sure. And so her argument was that short form content isn't what people have a natural propensity to necessarily go and like, oh, we don't read anymore. We only watch TikTok because inherently that's what we want to do. She's saying no, they've been programmed to think that way based on a model, trained because it's like crack. Right. I'm like, let's go back.
It's all addictive. It's like,
can we just go back to just smoking weed? We don't need crack. Right. No, but point is like, it's like a dopamine surge and it drives as addictive behavior, just like gambling does. Right.
Same phenomenon.
Right.
Dating and swiping.
And so if you took that away, right, would people just naturally go back to long form content? Would people go back to reading novels?
For Gen Z, like we would.
Oh, sorry. You have a mic.
You get 2 mics. I love that. Platform women. For Gen Z, like we consider long form 3 minutes. So I think there's something to be said about
so
how are we
like a 1,000-page tomb of a novel is not considered long form content.
For example, like what I think is like, again, going back to the point around generalizations, like I think a lot of it as like, what is the pipeline of like, what are we consuming? And then how does that behavior translate into the real world? Like digital, like a digital online experience then translates into the physical world. So like my answer to that would be is like, I completely agree that I don't necessarily know if long form, short form is a defining factor. I instead think it's like the subject matter interest. So for example, like book talk is huge. And a lot of the way that we talk about the content on these platforms is like it's edutainment. It's educationally entertaining content.
Yeah.
So Jack Edwards is an amazing TikToker who makes book talk videos. There was a video that he made about a specific novel. And a
book talk video is him telling like
book talk is the genre that on TikTok that's specifically focus on novels, books, writers.
And like
scholars,
a perspective and interpretation of the story, or the
it
actual.
could be anything. It could be like, this is a book. These are 5 books that I'm reading this summer.
Oh,
It could be
okay.
Like, here's my Goodreads. Here's a
Yeah.
book that I
To be
read.
an
It's
organized
phenomenal.
club, or
Yeah.
it's just like
It's just like a
just interactions with friends to talk about it, or
book talk itself is just what we call the interest area on TikTok content.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, I
all
see.
It's a
around
book club on TikTok, basically.
Yes. Anything related to book. It's more than that. So I don't want to limit it. It's just people talking about literary commentary, books, authors, all the things. Like everything.
That's going to be my entry point into TikTok. I think.
100%. And it's its own rabbit hole of sorts. But Jack Edwards, when he went and he talked about like a physical cover of a book and how it's this holographic and hologram. The book sales for that book went up by 2x in the week that it went out. Like, it was literally sold out in bookstores. And all he did was just talk about the significance of the cover and why he liked it in some context on that author. But I think it speaks to the fact that it's not as if Gen Z doesn't want to read or isn't interested in having tangible, physical, tactile. Like, I love reading on physical books. I just got a Kindle recently, but I was like, it was a gift because I didn't want to spend my own money on it. So I was like, if you guys want to get me something for my birthday, like, get me this, maybe it'll get me to read more. But I love a physical book. So all of it to say that I think that the behavior, the discovery point might have been on social and digital. The purchase behavior might have been online or maybe in a bookstore, but we're really seeing a translation of how people are choosing to then engage with these platforms. So I don't think it's long form or short form. Gen Z's told to have an 8-second attention span. That's a pseudoscience.
Yeah,
we literally
totally.
watch
people make
it is. Yeah.
We watch full movies on TikTok for 3 hours.
And you're driving some innovation, and I want to like generationally, I think, and I look at like obsession.
Yeah,
people are obsessed with obsession.
Yeah, 100%.
Why do you think that is?
Few things. I think both the obsession and backrooms when it comes to horror stories, like there's a level of absurdism and dark humor and escapism that Gen
And
Z
where
is
did
craving.
it tell everybody where it came from? I mean, like, it came from.
For obsession, I haven't seen. I actually don't know the
It
lore
came,
behind it.
no, but it just came from a YouTube generation, like a short form content
it's a short
generation
form, yes,
process.
exactly.
YouTubers
who
it
are
wasn't like
making
the Hollywood
content
production
before-
cycle. This was the
100%.
UGC production world, like the creator economy that created
and
this
they
movie.
didn't even want to. Initially, I think the studio made an offer. There was
Yeah, and it's been largely considered, and according to me, because I'm a huge horror fan from back in the day. Like, I watched some brutal horror films, and I was like, "Why did you make me watch that?" I was like, "Sometimes I like extreme experiences." But apparently, I mean, it's considered by many, and I've read a lot about it. Unfortunately, I shouldn't do that before I see it. But that, like, one of the more effective horror films ever made.
Yeah,
and I'm like, and it came from a YouTuber.
But people are going to theaters and they're like filming each other jump scares. The jump scares, like they're filming it and posting it. Like it's got this incredible social marketing that's working. It's cool.
So long form that dispels the myth.
Yeah, and I mean, Markiplier, who's a YouTuber, like just came out with his film that like sold out movie theaters and like did very well at the box office. So like, there's a lot of this just like convergence of like creatives and like what are the platforms that they're producing on and creating on. But Background Obsessions both like also had like Gen Z directors and a Gen Z team, and like it's like young people that made those films. And A24's best performing box office weekend came from these films that. It wasn't even, Mighty Supreme or other films, but we have some UTA talent that's a part of those films. And
thank God, right? Because COVID like decimated the film industry.
To see that. Yeah, Gen Z's back in theaters. 100%.
Yeah. It's like, thank God, this stuff is
100%.
valuable. I mean, I learned that lesson, and we should end with it, but I learned that lesson because I saw my older son who's at Syracuse, and I said, like, wow, like you guys just don't read any books. I'm like, can you read a book? Can you read a book? Can you read a book? This obsession, like it's like your knowledge base, right? And then we were in Paris and we're having dinner. I'm not like some jet setter, but we were in Paris with the family on a vacation. It was my wife's like 50th birthday, right? And we're having dinner, and he pulled up his or I think Kai, his younger brother, pulled up like his, what's the app that tracks movies? How much? I just look stopped. Film stopped or
nope. It's gonna bother me. Give me 1 second. It's
I just was showing the app and I totally
it's not
forgot.
Goodreads. They always do the interview. What are your top 4 films?
Yeah.
Wow.
But point being is that I didn't know this. He was using this app, and Kai goes, "Oh my God!" He goes, "It was August of beginning of August." He goes, "You've watched like 410 films, long form content."
Wow.
In the first 9 months of the year. I'm like, what are you watching? You're watching like 2-3 movies a day. Like, he wanted to be a film major, and I told him that, probably go towards business and you go into an industry afterwards. It's like, but point being is, I think it kind of dispelled, and I think what you've said that a lot of the stuff is just, it wasn't your choice. younger generation's choice, any of our choices, to be engineered to like, you know,
inundated with
to dopamine driving content, like
100%.
either negative
It's
or positive.
antithetical to who we were.
Yeah, that really that much hasn't changed at all. And it's just like, if we would just stop and listen to the younger generations, maybe. So thank you. This is really really
so nice to chat
he
with
was
you guys.
he was
you know,
saying
so
like,
appreciate
oh,
it.
this is gonna be fun, and I'm glad we were.
Now we all have to go see Obsession because I haven't seen it
Yeah,
either. So
I promise my daughter will go see it.
I
so.
love it.
Yeah.
It's intergenerational. I love
Yeah,
that going
yeah.
together.
Well, all right. Well, hey, this was a terrific conversation. We'll have you on a longer form
Thank
pod
you so
because
much.
I think there's definitely a lot to talk about. And I think there's a lot to uncover that's really important to brands, to agencies, to the entire ecosystem, that you're bringing a perspective that it needs to have the light like shined
Thank
on
you so
it,
much.
right?
Thanks so much for asking such inquisitive questions and giving you your commentary. I loved it.